Holy crap.
People persist in doubting the evidence.
Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free.
If the game is rigged, change the game.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Game changer, game changer, game changer, game changer. The Game Changer Radio Network.
Putting all of our efforts towards
And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Yeah. What's up? Fade to Black. The Tuesday edition. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. What is up, everybody? Today's Tuesday, June 23rd. 175 days into the new year. 190 days left. We are live from the City of Angels Studios right here in downtown Burbank, California. City of Angels Vapor. Makers of the Fade to Black e-juice. It's called Fader Loops. Fader Loops. You know, Fader Loops. Just go to the COA banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Find it, use it. Everybody vapes. Get your Fader Loops. Use the promo code Jimmy for the Fader Not Special. Let's get this show cracking. I am ready. Tonight, Daniel Sheehan is with us. Have you read his CV? Have you read his bio? That's why I'm excited. I'd like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black. I am your oh-so-humble host, Jimmy Church, for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, The Planet. I welcome you. Big proud salute to the men and women in uniform all around the world, fighting the good fight for us. For without them, there was no me, there was no you, there was no us. And you could not hear me right now. Need you to think about that for a second. All right. I'm in the chair. I made it. I was watching Twitter when I got to the studio. It was like, where's dude? I'm here. All right. Love my Starbucks. Tonight, we have attorney, activist, man of the world, Daniel Sheehan is with us. Tomorrow night, live in the studio, here in the studio, live, director Paul Davids will be with us. I was just talking to Mr. Sheehan before the show. He'd like to take your calls tonight. I said, that sounds like a really good idea. So we'll be doing that, 323-825-5045. We'll do that in the second segment, as always, right there. And it's kind of funny because I said, well, it just depends on where the conversation is going. Because if it's real good, I'm going to keep it to myself. He's like, so fired up, so excited. And I don't know if we got it up, everybody, but we have, we're going to go ahead and cut loose of the very limited edition Contact in the Desert t-shirts, the crew shirts. And if you were there in person and you gave us a helping hand, you got a crew shirt. So there's there may be, I would say, we probably had 25 in the crew. Okay, so we have a very limited number of shirts left, And I almost want to make sure they only go to Fadernauts, man. That, either somebody that was there at Contact in the Desert or, just one of you regular contributors. But anyway, I think they're up on the website. They should be. I didn't get a chance to check before I stopped in the studio. But if somebody wants to look, let me know. You know what? No, don't check. Because if you check, you might cut off the feed. So, don't do that. We'll look into it later. Riri can text me and let me know if they are up. All right? I'm excited. Tonight is a very big night. Daniel Sheehan is one of the brightest people out there on the planet on any level. And for him to come in tonight and be willing to sit down and share his knowledge with all of us is a privilege. And in advance, thank you, Dan. I am waiting. With a guy like that is so esteemed, right? That kind of guy. Do you get away with calling him Dan? Hey, D. D, what's up? What's up, D? What's up, Holmes? So anyway, tonight he will be with us. All right. Let's get this show cracking. I've got last night I told you that I had a whole thing that I wanted to start on the dark net, the deep web, the hidden net. And we're going to be doing that tonight. We're going to be doing that right after the break. And I'm going to get to that as soon as I can because we've got a lot to talk about. And it's probably going to be split up into like a 5-parter. And tonight will be the first part. So we're going to get to that. And there's reasons for it. I'll get to it. First, let's get to today's birthdays. And, and I've said this, I haven't said this. For all of the new listeners out there, you have to understand. I do this show for me, right? The show is for me. It's what I think is fun for me and cool for me. And when I do, that way we've attracted, people that are like me, if you know what I'm saying. And you guys get the show. But for the new listeners that are listening tonight, maybe your first time in, second time in, third time in, you've seen consistencies of the show that we do every single night. Well, one of them, when I do birthdays, I don't, out of the thousands of celebrities and people and friends that have birthdays today, there's going to be one or two out of that affected my life, that affected our generation, and that truly are worth mentioning. And then when I do that, and this is for the new listeners, this isn't for anybody that's listened to this show for the last couple of years, but and then I mention how they've affected me and my life, and that helps you understand the lack of brains in this show. That's what it does. It gives you a foundation of where I am coming from. Okay, so with that, let's get to that. Okay, let's do it. Today, Glenn Danzig is 60. That's it. I can stop right there. After that statement, Jimmy, that you just said, and then you're going to go with Glenn Danzig. You damn skippy. I'm going to go with Glenn Danzig. Glenn Danzig rocks. And you never know if you're listening to Danzig or The Cult. Boom, boom, boom. And for those of you that are Glenn Danzig fans, get that joke. Glenn Danzig, 60 years old. And where are we now in society today when a guy like Glenn Danzig turned the big 6-0? My goodness gracious. Love Glenn. That's a cool dude. Very creative guy. And he influenced an entire generation of rock and rollers. And it wasn't so much, you didn't have to be into his style of music, but he influenced everybody. And there you go. He was a game changer. Still is. Glenn Danzig is 60 years old. Rita just said this whole birthday thingy. Yeah, Jimmy. Nope. That's my executive producer. She's so wrong. Glenn Danzig is 60. Our dead guy's birthday today is Johannes Gutenberg. 1400 to 1468, died at the age of 67. And I will say this, when you look at the entire breadth of human history and all of the inventions, rocket ships, telephones, the wheel, fire, whatever, farming, whatever, pick something. Probably nothing has influenced more on the human race than Gutenberg and his press. Okay? That's it. There's ancient history, and then there's new history. And it's because of him, Gutenberg. He invented the first printing press back in the 15th and 16th century. We all know that the first thing that he printed was the Bible. And I happened to see one once at a museum exhibit. And it was a pretty moving experience because the thing looked really, really good. And it was like 600 years old, something crazy, just nuts. Anyway, Gutenberg, happy birthday. And then we have Stuart Sutcliffe, 1940 to 1962. He died at the age of 21. Yes, he was the Beatles' first bassist. He was credited, along with John Lennon, for creating the band's name. But then he left. He quit to pursue his career as an artist. Sutcliffe was in Hamburg, Germany. He was going to art school when he just collapsed. He was sick for a while. Headaches, blindness from the headaches coming and going. Nobody knew what it was. They almost just sent him home. Dude, there's nothing wrong with you kind of thing. Then he collapsed for the final time on April 10th, 1962, and died before the ambulance reached the hospital. His cause of death was revealed to have had a cerebral hemorrhage. Stuart Sutcliffe, happy birthday. Tragic, 21 years old. Unbelievable. All right, where are we? Let's go. Let's get the show cracking. I've got a lot to talk about tonight. Don't miss Hanger 1. It is the last episode, which will be this Friday, episode 12. Don't miss it. Do follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Email is Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. All simple, all easy. Tonight, Daniel Sheehan is with us. Tomorrow night, Paul Davis live right here in the studio. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll be right back after this. Stay with us.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I gotta tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil 3-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, The Planet.
Hi, this is Chase Kletsky with Fate Magazine Radio, and you're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station, where the Fadernauts rock.
Man, what is going on? I walk out of the studio for a few seconds, and I come back, and Spiritual Warrior just tweeted out, "Oh, man, I just finished a potato, bacon, and butter mashup." Is that what you're doing during the show? I wish I was doing it. This is Fade to Black. Welcome back, everybody. Tonight, we do have attorney and activist, all-around world traveler Daniel Sheehan is with us tomorrow night. Paul David's live in the studio. Call-in numbers 323-825-5045. You can also Skype in Fade to Black 14. And I'm at that point of the show where I'm going to take me a vitamin. Got to do it. Got to do it live on the air. Here I go. Watch this. This is how I do it. It's in my mouth right now. EnergyWave.com. I'm serious. I feel better already. Just like that. Boom. Do you feel tired? Not me. Nope. I have that energy. I have it. It's flowing through me. Just swallowed that Power Vite. Smelled it, swallowed it, love it. Power Vites are a complete multiple vitamin mineral formula designed to naturally boost your energy. This multivitamin goes to work now. Like now. Amazing. It's amazing what it does to my digestive system, my body, everything. I got color in my face. Oh, by the way, I shaved my goatee today. Shaved it off. I did. And then I did a selfie and I sent it to Rita. Scared her to death. She didn't know who it was. Just wanted to see if I had color in my face since I've been taking these vitamins, man. I'm serious. And I look pretty good for an old guy. The Green Turtle Bay Vitamin Company are dedicated nutritionists and have been producing Power Vites for over 20 years right here in the United States of America. They produce high-quality nutritional, dietary, and health supplements in small, fresh, potent batches, and they ship direct to you. To order, go to their website at EnergyWave.com. That's EnergyWave.com. Use the promo code KGRA. Get free shipping on your order. I said it yesterday on the show. You order take a picture of yourself with your Power Vites or your Power Mates. Take a picture. I'll tweet it. That's right. Call 1-800-TURTLE-5. That's 1-800-TURTLE-5. Live operators are standing by right now. 1-800-887-8535. All right. On this day in history in 1987, Tiffany plays the Paramus Park Mall in Paramus, New Jersey for the first time. That's right. Making history. Hey, Rita, post that picture of me and Tiffany. Tweet that out so everybody can see that. It's pretty interesting. It's a cool pic. But, yeah, she changed the world, didn't she? Playing shopping malls. Fader facts. Of all of the animals, only humans blush. And we begin to blush at about the age of 3. Not 2, but 3. There you go. All right. I want to talk about the dark net, the deep web, the dark web, the deep net, the invisible web, the hidden web. These are all names for something that you probably don't know much about. There's probably a few of you out there that know everything about it. But imagine for a second that you have just had like the world's worst, craziest nightmare. You went to a deep, dark place, lightning bolts going off in the background, and it was this a never-ending dream. You're in a time warp. You don't know where you're at. You can't see on the other side of the wall. You're just there. and there's no escaping it, and there's dark things going on, and you're witnessing things that you know you shouldn't be seeing, and it's horrendous. Well, you know what? That thing that you're thinking about, that nightmare, that conspiratorial dark netherworld exists today. It is real. Yes, the dark net, deep web, dark web, invisible web, hidden web, deep net, whatever you want to call it. These words are interchangeable. For tonight, we're going to call it the dark net. Okay, we're just going to run with that. You know what I'm talking about when I say dark net. Like I said, depending on who you talk to, they all have their own name for it. The hidden web. But I think the dark net is the right word. Words. Because it could be two words. It's an overlay network. And it is a portion, the majority of web content on the World Wide Web that is not indexed by standard search engines. I'll get to more of that in just a second. And that overlay network can only be accessed with specific software, configurations, authorizations, invitations. Okay? You just can't go and find it. You cannot do that. You have to work to get there. But it is so immense and so large and so insane to wrap your brain around it. I'm going to help you do that tonight. But to just get an idea of the size of it, and we'll get to those numbers in a second, it's mind-blowing. Now, it's one type of access to it is the anonymous peer-to-peer networks that are out there. There's a few of them which are anonymized. And that is a series of connections, and quite possibly just before you get to where you're going, you could go through 1,000 servers. Okay? Shared peer-to-peer situations too as well, where you are scrambled so many times, and then by the time you get to the website that you're probably going to go to doesn't have a name at all. It's just a series of numbers and letters. There's nothing there's nothing there. In other words, we'll get to all of that in just a second. But most use Tor, T-O-R. Tor is an acronym that stands for the Onion Router. T-O-R, the Onion Router. And you may have heard about Tor, on the news, or maybe from some friends, depending on who you hang out with. But that's what it stands for, the Onion Router. And that's because it is searching for, or is going to list websites with the extension Onion. Okay? And it's a communication method that you need to understand. It is intended for one thing: anonymity. No way to know who you are, where you are coming from, what you are doing, and why you are there. That's it. Now, the size of the web itself, the dark web, is impossible to measure. It is. It's hard to put estimates on. I have researched this subject for years. The first time I had heard about the dark web was probably 1995, 1996. And I was told about it and went out and tried to research it and came up with, and especially back then, some very, very dark areas of the surface web. The surface web is where you are now. Okay, the surface web is tiny. It's tiny. You could throw all of the content on all of the websites on like 100 DVDs. And you could have everything on the globe just stored and saved. Just to put it into context. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not by much. Okay? Now, when I say that it's impossible to measure, the majority of the information is hidden itself or it's locked inside of databases that you can't access, so it's impossible to measure. There are numbers. You can go out and you can research this yourself. And there are numbers that estimate that the dark web is 400 on the low side to 550 to 600 times larger than the surface web. Now, just digest that for a second. You think the web is big? You think the surface web is big? You think your little Google browser is big? Safari? You think it's Mozilla? You think you're getting it all done? It's 400 to 600 times larger than what you think you know. Wrap your brain around that. However, since more information and sites are always being added all day long, data acquisition, storage, new clandestine websites and darknet markets and so forth, DNMs, are being opened and around the world all the time. It's growing exponentially at a rate that can't be judged. We don't know. Google has indexed 200 terabytes of data. Listen, this is Google's own numbers. Google has indexed 200 terabytes of data. That's nothing. I've got terabyte drives all over the place. I could almost have 200 terabyte drives right here in the studio. That's nothing. Google claims it has only indexed a minuscule, a paltry 0.04%. The index web contains at least 4.67 billion pages. That's as of today, Tuesday, the 23rd of June, 2015. The deep web consists of 7.5 petabytes. Listen to what I just said. You got 200 terabytes of index data versus 7.5 petabytes. It's insane. Darknets are used for a variety of reasons. And at the end of the show tonight, I'm going to get into this on the dark side, the darkest of the dark side. But generally, it's there to protect the privacy from targeted and mass surveillance. Okay? The law. It's there to protect dissidents from political reprisal. It's there for that. It's there for whistleblowing and news leaks. A lot of that happens on the dark web first. It's there for computer crime. It's there to buy drugs, guns, things that are horrendously illegal. And it's also there for file sharing. And it's also there for storage, bank records, old stuff, insurance, all that stuff. And they store it. But it's a place where you can go and hang out when you do not want to be found. Think about that for a second. And the other side of it is, there is respect and accountability amongst thieves, and how they deal with themselves. I said criminals, and how they deal with themselves on the dark side. We can all learn something from. This is Fade to Black. I have got so much more on this, and we will be doing it all tonight. I'm excited. This is Fade to Black. And when I say this is not your daddy's radio show, you're going to find out about that tonight. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Bespoke radio for the masses. When I come back after the break, Daniel Sheehan will be with us. Bespoke radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, the planets. Don't go anywhere. Danny's going to be in the batter's box in 2 seconds. And we'll be back in 2 minutes.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
Hi, this is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Today, everybody, the Fadernauts and planet Earth is vaping. And I'm very proud to announce our very own e-juice. When we were approached by City of Angels Vapor about Fade to Black e-juice, I wanted to make sure that it was the very best and that the flavors were something that I could create myself. And we did just that. Introducing Fade to Black Fader Loops. This will take you right back to Saturday morning cartoons and your favorite bowl of Fruity Loopy cereal. Just click on the banner or go to www.coavapor.com. Enter the promo code Jimmy for the Fadernaut special. That's www.coavapor.com. Go back, Lee Tappy.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you. And your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Let TalkStream Live transform the way you listen to radio. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mobile talk radio from TalkStream Live. Now available in the iTunes App Store.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And this is Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
Yes.
We are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
Attention, all Fadernauts. Studio Dome has a special deal on their SD1 Bluetooth speaker. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on their banner, enter the promo code Jimmy, and you get $40 off and free shipping on the SD1. It's voice activated, comes with a USB antenna, cables, and a carry bag. Never listen to your phone, tablet, or laptop speakers ever again. It's the only way to listen to Fade to Black. That's jimmychurchradio.com, Studio Dome banner, promo code Jimmy. Go back, Lee Tappy. All right, welcome back. This is Fade to Black, the spoke radio for the masses. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, director Paul Davids will be live in the studio right here with us. It's going to be great. We don't get too many people to visit the bunker and come here and hang out, and so it'll be fun to be face-to-face with Paul Davids tomorrow night. Tonight, Daniel Sheehan is with us. Yes, he is in the batter's box. I see him swinging right now. Daniel Sheehan is the general counsel and co-director for the Institute for Cooperation in Space. He is a graduate of Harvard Law School, a former director of the Christic Institute, and is a professor of world politics at the University of California. Mr. Sheehan has a long and distinguished history as a public interest counsel and as legal counsel in the Pentagon Papers case, Iran-Contra, 3 Mile Island, and, of course, the Karen Silkwood cases. In 1994, Dan defended Dr. John Mack before his inquisition by an investigatory panel of the Harvard Medical School after Dr. Mack's publication of Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens. This was not his first nor his last encounter with the important issue of alien intelligence and American law. In 1977, while general counsel to the United States Jesuit Office of Social Ministry in Washington, D.C., he served as a special consultant to the United States Library of Congress Congressional Research Office project on extraterrestrial intelligence ordered by President Jimmy Carter. I had the pleasure to visit with Mr. Sheehan briefly, at Contact in the Desert, where he got a standing ovation for his presentation on, well, we'll talk about that in a second, but it was certainly the buzz of Contact in the Desert. And as I walked around Contact and visited with everybody out there, I was constantly bombarded with people coming up. Jimmy, did you see Daniel Sheehan? Were you there? Did you see it? Did you witness it? And although briefly, I walked in at the end of the presentation and I saw the buzz that was going on in there. And it was a tremendous event. And it's my pleasure to welcome back to the program Mr. Daniel Sheehan. Daniel, are you with us, sir?
I'm right here, Jimmy. Thanks.
And, it's funny when you and I were talking earlier today and you said, Jimmy, it's Danny. My brother's name is Danny, and I'm so tempted to call you Danny. I'm uncomfortable with that, so I'll do my best.
I've always been called Danny for my entire life.
It's great, and I just want to call you Danny, so I'll do my best to hold back from it, just out of respect, sir. And now I want to do a few things with you tonight. The last time that you were on, we were very focused on a very important subject, ET contact. Tonight, we have 2 or 3 very important subjects that I'd like to hopefully weave the conversation through to. But as you know, you've been a guest on the show, so this is open-ended. I have no prepared questions. And with you, it's great, like it is with every guest, but with you especially. There's so many important things to talk about. So are you ready?
I'm perfectly ready.
Okay. Let's I want to start first. We have to start with contact in the desert, because I was watching from afar. I was watching you walk around. By the way, I had no idea that you were like 6'10". By the way, I didn't know you were that tall. And but anyway, I'm watching you walk around, which is easy to do because you're tall and broad-shouldered. But I was watching the reaction of everybody and people coming up to you and wanting to talk to you after your presentation. What went on in that room, and what because you brought the house down and you were walking around like you were Elvis Presley or something after that. What did you do what did you do in that room?
Well, actually, Jimmy, there were 2 different presentations that I was asked to make. I did a 2-hour presentation and a 3-hour presentation that drew a good deal of the attention. I did a smaller 1-hour presentation specifically about Dr. John Mack and my representation of Dr. Mack before the faculty committee at Harvard University. But the major presentations, the 2-hour presentation and the 3-hour presentation, were distinct presentations. Some people actually conflated the 2 of them because they had heard about, quote, Danny's presentation, and there were 2 different presentations, and both of them caused quite a stir. So some of the people made a mistake and conflated the 2 of them together. But the first one, the 2-hour presentation that I gave on Sunday morning, was a presentation about actually the first one I gave was on Saturday morning, which was the presentation about the call that had been issued by Dr. Jose Fuentes, who is the Jesuit priest who is the director of the Pontifical Observatory in Rome. And he convened, back in October of 2009, he convened a group of some 36 world scientists on the issue of extraterrestrial intelligence. In light of the fact that the Hubble telescope and then the Planck telescope and the others have been now sent up into orbit around the Earth, and they are able to be stationary with regard to the other planets and star systems, etc. And they have been, as we know now, the Kepler space telescope has been launched specifically for the purpose of seeking out and identifying new Earth-like planets around the various stars. And we have now come to realize, based upon these handful of new satellite telescopes that we have, that they've expanded the projection as to the number of star systems just in our Milky Way galaxy up to now. It used to be 100 billion, then it went to 200 billion. Now they believe that it's approximately 500 billion star systems in our Milky Way galaxy. And they believe that approximately 20% of those have multiple planets around them. And that of those, some 1/4 of those, they believe have Earth-like planets, which are solid rock and soil planets within the Goldilocks zone. That is the zone that is not too far and not too close to their respective sun, given the size of their sun, so that the amount of light and heat that would be given to the planet from that star would in fact make life possible. And they've now come to compute that there are approximately 40 billion Earth-like planets just in our solar system, or excuse me, just in our galaxy, rather, 40 billion Earth-like planets in the Goldilocks zones of stars in our own galaxy. And while there are 500 billion star systems in our galaxy, they're now believed to be 500 billion trillion galaxies. And so that the ability of the scientific community to maintain their long-time insistence that they did not really believe that it was probable that other extraterrestrial life existed, they now have come to realize that it is unavoidable for them to acknowledge that life certainly exists elsewhere in the universe and certainly within our own galaxy. And so Father Fuentes convened a gathering of major scientists, including exobiologists, who were starting to brief the hierarchy of the Catholic Church about the growing certainty that another highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but distinctly non-human civilization was likely to be encountered within the next very, very few years, possibly within a decade. And so the Catholic Church held a major conference and determined that the Jesuit order, that Dr. Jose Fuentes was going to come forward and hold a public press conference at the Vatican, which he did, calling upon all of the people of the world to begin to participate in a profoundly important discussion about the important philosophical and theological questions that were going to be posed to our human family when we discovered another highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but non-human species in our own galaxy. And that stunned many of the people there at contact in the desert because they hadn't heard about this. And since I was the chief counsel for the United States Jesuit headquarters in Washington, D.C. for a full decade, between 1975 and 1985, I'd worked very closely with the formulation of the public policy positions of the Jesuit order under Superior General Pedro Rupe. And I had actually posed to the Jesuits back in 1977 the question of trying to address these fundamental philosophical and theological questions. And we'd reached out to the other 54 major religious denominations that had national offices in Washington, D.C., and had specifically asked them to join with us in a discussion of these fundamental philosophical and theological questions. But at that time, the other orders, the other denominations did not want to engage in that. They thought that there were other more immediately pressing questions, of course, which there are many of, which range all the way from the existence of thermonuclear weapons to the global climate change that is threatened, in the rise of the national security state with the onset of massive electronic surveillance, et cetera, that we know about. So that this issue had been temporarily set aside as a major issue on which we could gather consensus among all of the religious denominations. But now, since the Kepler has been put into orbit and we're starting to discover more and more of these new planets, the time has arrived now for this discussion to begin. And so I posed those questions to the group of some 250, 300 people that were there to start this discussion. And in light of the fact that I had been called upon by the Library of Congress, their Congressional Research Service, back in 1977, to participate in that research on behalf of President Carter, I guess the people in the room viewed me as somewhat of an authority on the issue. And so they were rather thunderstruck, I think, by the fact that the largest religious order on the planet, which has almost 33% of all of the members of any of the religious denominations in the world, are members of the Catholic Church, that the call by the largest religious community on the planet for this discussion shocked them. And then they began to engage in a very energized discussion of these philosophical and theological questions. I took some time to point out what the differences were between strictly philosophical questions and theological questions, and I took some time to point out to them what some of these questions were in order to kind of kickstart the conversation, and that generated quite a stir. But the 3-hour presentation that I was asked to give, I actually began to address the recent, from as of June 18th. This was prior to this time. This was right at the very end of May, and I was projecting that in June of this month, that Pope Francis was going to be issuing a papal encyclical in which he was going to be calling upon all the people of the world to begin to participate in a discussion about how to address global climate change and what we were going to be able to do about this in identifying the transnational corporate capitalist economic system as being the proximate cause of global climate change, pointing out that the corporation, which had as its sole objective the maximization of short-term profit, so that the profits could be distributed to the shareholders of the corporations, and the fact that the owners of the corporation, those who owned the shares of the corporation, were completely immunized against any personal legal liability for anything that the company did, together had created this monster that was devouring the planet and was devouring the natural resources, or tearing off the top halves of mountains and gouging out the minerals, coal and other minerals, and spewing the poisons into the rivers and billowing millions of tons a year of global greenhouse gas emissions up into the atmosphere, generating a massive climate change, which we're seeing all of the consequences of, with massive tornadoes all through not just Oklahoma, but into the middle southern states, and massive drought in California, and huge thunderstorms in New England, and massive freezing cold spells all through the Midwest in the winter. And these are all being brought on by man-caused global climate change. And so I pointed out that Francis was going to be issuing this papal encyclical, specifically identifying the transnational corporate capitalist economic system and their corollary banking system, which was generating notes, these Federal Reserve notes, that represented nothing but debt on the part of people across the world. That he was going to be condemning this economic system as a fundamental evil that had to be changed, and calling for the creation of a new planetary economic system that valued human life and the health of our planet over the short-term profits of the stockholders. And so what had happened is that a couple of the people who had attended both of these conferences that I had had confused themselves and actually thought that Francis was getting set to issue a papal encyclical announcing the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence, which wasn't so. That these were two completely discrete presentations that I made, and in the first presentation, it wasn't a matter of predicting or the Pope taking a position that he was going to announce the discovery of extraterrestrial intelligence. It's just that Father Fuentes had stated that they believed that it was extremely probable that within the very short period of time, in the next decade or so, we were probably going to encounter extraterrestrial life, and that we had to begin this profound discussion of the philosophical implications of this. So, but each of those, that prior to anybody getting confused and conflating the two of them, the people who came to each of those conferences became quite excited about both of those issues, and so that there were lots of questions that people were asking, and so when I was walking around from one event to another, going to the events that a number of my friends were doing, Richard Dolan was there, and Stan was there, and Linda Moulton Howe was there, and a lot of our friends that I've known for years. I've been in this particular area since 1977, and in fact, since I represented Dr. John Mack in 1994, I've been asked to be the keynote speaker at a number of major gatherings, all the way from the International UFO Congress, both when it was still in Laughlin, Nevada, and after it moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, with John Rao, and also at the MUFON conferences. So I've been there for a long time, so I knew a lot of the people that were there. So when I was going from one place to another to see some of my friends and what presentations they were making, there were a lot of people who came up to me to want to ask questions about the presentations that I had made. So it did become a bit of a stir, I guess.
I have seen and watched many times all of your different speeches and presentations. I've watched them all. Each one of them, by the way, was completely independent of the prior, which I really dig. When and they're also very fluid. You know what we'll talk about in a bit. Let me visit subject number one and the Vatican and knowledge of ET.
Yes.
My question is this: they actually, when they made that partial disclosure, saying that there is a possibility of life out there, and they made that general statement, but they also tacked on a disclaimer, if you remember, which was, Jesus is everywhere, God is everywhere, and so he's probably part of that alien presence too as well. It was a weird thing to tack on the back end of that. And
actually, that statement preceded the statements that were made in 2009. There was a 2008 article that Father Fuentes was interviewed for in L'Osservatore, which L'Osservatore is the Vatican official newspaper, and he addressed the issue back in 2008 when he said that he thought that it was likely that we were going to be encountering intelligent life within our lifetimes, and that he thought that it was important to understand that he actually said, what he said was that a more remarkable statement. He said that people were wondering whether or not Jesus dying on the cross, that whole thing the Catholic Church goes through, did that in fact save other species and other planets if they were intelligent? And what Father Fuentes said is that it was actually possible that some of the other species were not in need of being saved, that they in fact may not have suffered. They may be beyond, they may have evolved beyond the state where our consciousness, our intellectual consciousness has generated an experience of separation from the rest of created reality. And therefore, they didn't need this higher level of consciousness brought to them that Jesus represents. See, when you strip away all of the kind of metaphors and mythology around this, what we're really dealing with here, Jimmy, is that our human family is basically in the process of evolving an entire additional faculty. A faculty by means of which we can directly and experientially encounter, just as we encounter light with our eyes and we encounter sound with our ears, there's an additional faculty evolving in our human family by means of which we can directly and experientially encounter the phenomenon that bonds together every ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the entire universe. And so that this type of unitive experience that we can have, an immediate, direct, experiential encounter, like with light or sound, is what is happening. And that there are mutations that have manifested during the last 3,000 to 4,000 years of individual human beings who have this faculty quite fully evolved. And these beings are avatars. These are mystical beings, prophets, who have been able to experientially discern the unity of all being, and that they therefore experience the sorrow of people doing what we do to each other. And they speak out about it in a prophetic manner and talk about the fact that we are all moving toward this state of consciousness. And that's what the entire re legare, the Latin root of religion, re legare, means the relinking of our alienated consciousness that has evolved at the point where we evolved self-reflective intelligence. And intelligence, the real Latin root of it is intellectus. Intellectus means the ability to distinguish the difference between. So when we evolved from that period between Homo erectus and Homo sapien, actually moving from Australopithecus to Homo erectus, that point of our evolution caused us, well, at the one instance, to be self-reflective and to perceive ourselves as separate and apart from all the rest of the universe, that enabled us to think in relationship to other entities, in relationship to other objects, so that our intellect could actually abstract those relationships and work out mathematical relationships, etc. That whole form of the intellect brought with it, on the other side, a deep sense of alienation and separateness from our unitive experience with the universe as being an integral part, an organic aspect of the created reality. And so what happened is that we've gone through this period of the intellect where we have extolled the intellect to such a level that we've completely separated ourselves out, separate and apart from all the rest of created reality, and have come to try to dominate it and manipulate it and use it for our own self-interest. And that is what has brought about the consequences that we are now encountering with the environment, of the pollution and the contamination, and even to the point of altering our entire natural climate and the cycles. So that this is the warning that Francis has delivered, that we have come too far in the isolation of ourselves from our environment. We need to re-experience the re legare, this religious experience, the re legare, in that this is what is evolving teleologically and progressively in our human family. It's been written about by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin is a Jesuit priest. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin is a very complicated French name, but Teilhard is how they refer to him. Teilhard was a Jesuit priest and a paleontologist who discovered Peking man. And he began to write about this biological evolution of this additional faculty that we were evolving, pointing out that Jesus had this faculty fully evolved, as did other prophets and other avatars. And he got into trouble with the Vatican, in which the Committee on Orthodoxy, the Doctrine of the Faith, was headed up by Ratzinger, Karl Ratzinger, who became Benedict XVI.
Well, let's hold it right there. We're against a hard break. That's a good place to stop right there. We'll pick up right there with Ratzinger, one of my favorite subjects, when we come back. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Tonight, Daniel Sheehan. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
Hey, everybody, what's up? Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and check this out. The 2015 MUFON Symposium will be held this September 24th through the 27th in beautiful downtown Irvine, California. Expanding ufology, opening new doors in academia, industry, and media. Former Defense Minister of Canada Paul Hellyer will be there in person. Former CNN news anchor Cheryl Jones, TV news journalist Jaime Maussan, and MUFON's chief photo analyst Mark D'Antonio. They're just a few of the growing list of names for the 2015 event. It's September 24th through the 27th at the beautiful Hotel Irvine. Get your tickets today at MUFONSymposium.com. That's MUFONSymposium.com. Go Beckley Tepe.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Did you ever turn to your radio for your favorite talk show to find that it's been preempted for this?
In the air, to deep right center. Back goes Lewis to the wall, and it's out of here!
Or this?
And I'm ashamed of you, Hillary, for voting for it.
Do you have a favorite talk radio program that's not available in your city? Just go to TalkStreamLive.com for links to the best streaming talk radio shows. At TalkStream Live, you will find live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All your favorites are here. With such a large selection, you will also discover some new favorites. On the go and still want to listen? With a mobile smartphone, simply type TalkStream Live on your internet browser. Now you can take internet radio with you. You will also find hundreds of music, news, and sports streams. Best of all, the TalkStream Live directory is free and there's never a login required. Remember TalkStreamLive.com, the fastest route between you and your favorite talk radio show.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. Tonight, Daniel Sheehan is with us. And Daniel, before we go back to Ratzinger, there's one thing that I like to ask successful people that have found their bliss and happiness in life and have done things for us. And I like to ask him, what is the recipe there in that, defending John Mack and Karen Silkwood and the Pentagon Papers, Iran-Contra, 3 Mile Island, any one of those situations, and an attorney has had a successful career and he can hang his hat on something, but you have been involved, as the point source and counsel for some of the most important things in modern history for us. How do you explain that? That's not blind luck. And how do you explain the success? And what kind of advice would you give somebody like me?
Well, what it is that I was very fortunate to my father was the first Sheehan man in our family ever to graduate from high school. And so I didn't have any long tradition of anybody ever having gone to college or anything, but I ended up getting a full scholarship to go to Harvard College, and ended up taking American foreign policy from Henry Kissinger, and economics from John Kenneth Galbraith, and sociology from Reisman, and et cetera. And I was there in those kind of halcyon days. And ended up going to Harvard Law School. I was the Rhodes Scholar nominee for Harvard College to go to Oxford. And I ended up getting a great opportunity for having an education. But I was from a very clearly blue collar family, and so even though I ended up at Harvard College, where half of the kids are related to the Secretary of State. I didn't really buy into becoming part of an elite circle that would simply represent wealthy people, imply my trade, and utilize the skills that I had been taught to make rich people richer. But even though I was recruited by the number one corporate law firm in the world, Cahill Gordon, down on the Wall Street, I went there. I agreed to go there because they represented NBC News, and I represented right when I was still at law school. I was the co-founder of the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review, and because of that, I got a lot of contact with attorneys all around the country, bringing prime constitutional law cases to us. And so I was the one that wrote the briefs on a lot of those constitutional law cases. And so I was recruited because I actually represented the NBC television cameraman, John Pappas. And on his behalf, I was the first one ever to assert the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources. And so that case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court when I was just a second-year law student.
How can you even explain that away? How old were you at that time?
I was 23.
That's insane. I was 23. I was still trying to learn how to tune my guitar.
Well, what it is, Jimmy, is that I saw constitutional law as being the interface between really profound, kind of fundamental philosophical questions that one would have about the nature of reality, the place of our human family in this reality, and I saw that as the interface between those fundamental questions and the practical decisions that are made in a culture and in a society. They all pass through the matrix of constitutional law, because that is the place where the preservation of certain fundamental values have been deposited in our culture. And so I saw this right away as the key spot that I wanted to direct my attention to. And so what I did, of the 540 students that were at Harvard Law School, there were only a handful of us that were interested in this area. I was asked to write for the Harvard Law Review, and my first assignment that I was given was how to set up a foreign subsidiary for an American corporation. And I told told them I didn't have the slightest interest in setting up a foreign subsidiary for an American corporation. I wanted to do constitutional law.
Yeah,
and they said, we only do constitutional cases once a year or something when there's a major case decided by the United States Supreme Court. And so what I did is went off and set up the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review, along with Mark Green, who went on to become the Democratic Law Review, and I was the point man to whom I sent out letters from the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review all around the country announcing the creation of this law review, and I solicited requests from lawyers all around the country to send to us their most profoundly important constitutional questions, and we would do the briefs for them. And so I ended up doing briefs for F. Lee Bailey, and major law firms around the country that they didn't have the same level of interest that I did in those issues. And so I ended up, it was perfectly clear to me when I was asked to represent the NBC television journalists who had been subpoenaed by a grand jury out in New Bedford, Massachusetts, to demand that he turn over to them all of his interviews with the Black Panthers during the riots that followed the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. It immediately occurred to me, because of my familiarity with the Constitution, that this was a clear First Amendment violation, and that I knew enough how to articulate what it was. I had written my senior honors thesis at Harvard College in constitutional law, the historical origins of the Fifth Amendment. And there were no professors in the faculty at Harvard College that were able to follow that. And so I was assigned, Paul Freund and Arthur Sutherland, who were the major constitutional law scholars at Harvard Law School, to be my thesis advisors at the college. And so I wrote that thesis and went on, and even though I was the Rhodes Scholar nominee from Harvard College to go to Oxford, I got drafted by my draft board up in Lake George, New York, and refused to go. And so I went on up to the law school and became the chief research assistant for Professor Jerome Cohen, who was the head of the International Law Department at Harvard. And so I worked with him on his book about the illegality of the war in Vietnam. So I was perfectly poised when I got recruited by this number one corporate law firm in the world to go down to continue the case on behalf of NBC, asserting the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources. I was there when the New York Times brought to us the Pentagon Papers. And so I ended up being the one that got the call. I was the one that was called by Jim Goodell, the executive vice president of the New York Times, and told that we had the Pentagon Papers. And I was the one that made the decision to print them. And so I was the one that drafted all of the briefs for the New York Times to protect the New York Times' right to publish the Pentagon Papers. And I wrote the briefs for NBC News to establish the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources. And this was I was still a second-year law student.
That's... Right now, I'm glad this conversation kind of went in this direction. It is my belief that the United States isn't a country because of Washington, D.C. and elected politicians. It is not the United States because of its people. It's not the United States because of its borders or the battles that we have fought courageously or any of that. That's not what makes us the United States. Is that document called the Constitution, and that's what the United States is. Everything is right there.
That's right.
Am I wrong in saying that?
No. That's right. It's a document. But the thing that's most important, Jimmy, about the Constitution, and people don't realize this, but it turns out that of the drafters of the Constitution, James Madison and Aaron Burr and others that were involved in this, that it turns out that most of those people, and it's hard to believe it's true, but most of those people, including 3 of the original United States Supreme Court justices, 39 of the original members of the United States Senate and like some 40-plus members of the United States Congress, the original members, were all classmates at the College of New Jersey. And they all studied moral philosophy under Dr. John Witherspoon. And he taught them natural law, moral philosophy. And so that the entire underlying predicate of our American Constitution is rooted in natural law, which assumes that, as we said, that men are created equal and they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, etc. This concept of natural law rights is a profound and metaphysical reality, and that if in fact one studies it enough and pays enough attention to the Constitution, one comes to realize right away that it is a natural law document. And if you then get into probing into natural law, I went on and went to Harvard Divinity School to study the actual metaphysical and theological underpinnings of natural law, which turn out to be science, which turn out to be metaphysical science. It's quantum physics when you really investigate it, and you learn that this evolution of this biological faculty that our human family has is in fact the key reason why we have fundamental rights, because we are able to directly and immediately experientially discern the unitive phenomenon that bonds together every irreducible integer of matter in the entire physical universe, and by dint of that experience, we can experientially discern what type of conduct, human conduct, either individual or collective, is either harmonious with or disharmonious to the natural order of the universe. This is the underlying metaphysic of natural law, and it is the lodestone of the American Constitution. Now, 99 out of every 100 or less people who bothered taking one constitutional law course during the course of their law school don't even glean that reality. But because I focused on this directly and probed all the way to the underpinnings of it, that I happen to know more about it than most anybody. And so therefore, when I talk about it, people can tell that I know about it. And that the fact is I tend to know more about it than most judges and virtually all lawyers and even some Supreme Court justices. So that when I address a particular issue and I know how to explicate the issue and get down to the most profound roots of the issue, so that if in fact they're at all disposed to being objective and honest, they come to see that what I'm arguing is the way that we need to resolve this dispute, or else I wouldn't be arguing it. I don't just get paid. People don't just come walking into my office and pay me to represent them. I don't do that. Right. But what I do is I follow the fundamental issues about our culture and about our people and about our human family and our relationship to the planet and our relationship to each other. And those are the issues that I address. And I don't do it for pay. I don't do it for money. I do it because I know it's true. So it tends to be a little more persuasive than other people.
Sorry, I've been trying to get this in, but I can't interrupt you, and I will never do that. But with the events since 2001, we don't need to get into those details. But do you feel there's maybe some actionable subjects on our rights and on our freedoms that have been put into question, and would you have an actionable case to maybe take Bush or to the Supreme Court on, say, the Patriot Act or the actions of the NSA or other rights?
Oh yes. Oh yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about the fact that these decisions on the part of the Cheney Bush administration, the W. Bush administration, are profoundly and unquestionably unconstitutional. And the problem is that a substantial number of the people in Congress and in the courts know it, but they don't care. Many of them view the Constitution to be a ship that sits in the harbor in Boston. They don't really care about the Constitution because they're not constitutional lawyers. They're corporate lawyers. They're lawyers for the rich and the wealthy and the powerful, and they've been placed into the court system to protect those rights. They're not becoming honest and impartial judges. They're Federalist Society advocates of the national security state. And so that when you walk into a courtroom and you see them sitting there, you know absolutely that they don't have the slightest interest in protecting the Constitution, no matter what oath it is they've taken. That they've gotten their position by kowtowing to and serving the interests of the major corporate elite. That's how they got there. And so that they aren't going to be honest and impartial. Now, I can articulate to them why it is that it's clearly unconstitutional for a certain statute to be passed or a certain executive action to have been taken, and I can attempt to appeal to them as honest people and as legitimate protectors of the Constitution as to why they should dispose of this case in a particular way. But when they don't have any interest in being honest or objective, there's not much you can do with them. And and as of right now, you know perfectly well that we have at least 4 of the justices on the Supreme Court. Roberts as the Chief Justice, and Scalia, and Thomas and Alito, who are just right-wing, rock-ribbed reactionaries, and that's why they've been put there. John Roberts was the law clerk for William Rehnquist. And William Rehnquist was the hatchet man for the Nixon administration, all the way back under Richard Nixon, hand-picking the most right-wing reactionary judges he could possibly find and recruiting them to be nominees for the court. And that whole process went on for 2 decades. And so they have fundamentally infected the American judicial system with right-wing reactionaries. And they're not honest judges, and even the likes of Larry Tribe, who is the longtime constitutional law professor at Harvard. He tried to fight off for as long as he possibly could, this realization that these people were just fundamental right-wing reactionary political hacks. But he finally had to cough it up and acknowledge that they weren't being honest. They weren't following any kind of traditional precedents at all, that they were just rolling into place and trying to roll back, all of the major constitutional decisions that have been made in the last 100 years. And so that he realizes that, and so then he helped co-found the American Constitution Society. And it should be much more vigorous and effective than it is. They're nowhere near the kind of powerhouse that the Federalist Society is on behalf of the right-wing reactionaries. But the bottom line is that I know that the constitutional arguments can be made. I just don't think that there's an honest and objective corpus of lawyers that are judges now to pass honestly on those questions.
Yeah, after this show, I don't think you'd get a fair sit down at the Supreme Court. They would see you walking.
No, I wouldn't have to begin with. I could be as straight as an arrow, as Larry Tribe is. But Larry Tribe, when he finally got up in front of the court in Bush v. Gore, and he saw that those 4 judges were just going to rule, on behalf of W. Bush, no matter what it is they did.
Right.
No matter how profoundly correct the arguments were that Larry Tribe was making on behalf of Al Gore, that they didn't have the slightest interest in being honest or following the Constitution. So I've never made the mistake of thinking that if you pretend that you think something differently than you really do, or you believe that those people are more honest than they really are, that it's going to help you in the slightest. So I've never pretended like that. And so I've made the arguments I've made, and I was fortunate enough to be successful, even though I've had to plow my way through a number of judges to get them thrown off, for their bias and stuff. In the Karen Silkwood case, we had to throw 2 separate federal judges off the bench, in order to get at the fundamental questions underlying the murder of Karen Silkwood. But even then, we got an out-of-state federal judge, a really basically honest and decent judge, Frank G. Tice out of Kansas. When he was actually confronted with the fact that we had discovered in our investigation that the Kerr-McGee nuclear facility was smuggling 98% pure bomb-grade plutonium out of the facility to Israel and to Iran, even he froze up at the throttle, and just freaked out, and ruled that the Federal Civil Rights Act protected only black people.
Where do you think we let our guard down? It seems like, if we go back to the Leave It to Beaver days, plates full of brownies and milk, and coming home from school and your friends and your mom was there and your dad came home from work, and we were still very aware of our rights and we dropped our pants really, really quick.
Well, it's important to me to remember there's an old my favorite Irish aphorism. The Irish refer to Ireland as the old sod, and that there's an old Irish aphorism that says, well, the old sod, it's not what it used to be, but then it never was. And it's important to remember that back during the Leave It to Beaver days, the American Central Intelligence Agency was assassinating people all around the world. They were overthrowing governments in Nicaragua, and overthrowing governments in South America. Assassinating foreign leaders in Iran. Because of they insisted upon having their own oil and not letting it go to the Aramco alliance. The fact of the matter is that we lived in this mirage of being told constantly that the United States was defending liberty around the world, and that we fought on behalf of democracy and all that. That was never true. The question is that now that we've grown up and we come to have an adult view of the way the world really is, the thing that people are most surprised about with me is that I still believe.
So do I.
That I still believe that this is a great experiment, that we have this extraordinary opportunity here to bring into actual manifestation the fundamental beliefs in democracy and fundamental rights, individual human rights, etc. I'm not going to become cynical and give up on this. I'm going to stick with this thing, and we're going to come out the other side of this thing. It's just that we go through these periods of these deep dips where they become even more conspicuous about the fact that the Hamiltonian element inside the American government, Alexander Hamilton, right from the very beginning of the founding of the country, was a lawyer representing the major mercantile and banking interests. And that he is the one that fought against having direct elections of the president by the people, in fact fought against even having the direct election of United States senators. They were picked by the state legislature because he and his cronies in the business community didn't trust the American people, didn't trust the concept of democracy. And so they're right from the very beginning, even the Constitution itself has struck a balance between those elements, the Hamiltonians on the one side and the Madisonians and Jeffersonians on the other. I teach this as an entire class at the University of California here in Santa Cruz. In fact, it's up online on the Romero. If one goes to what is it? The Facebook, I guess, the Facebook for the Romero Institute.
Right.
The classes are all right there. We've videotaped the classes in high D definition, and we've made them available to people so they can see a class taught about this issue right from the inception of our country. It's the whole issue of natural law in the Constitution, and people can see it for free.
Let me ask you this. Am I wrong then in thinking that there was a time when we were protected against illegal search and seizures where there was actually a detective that came into the office and said, okay, we need a phone tap. Okay, well, we've got to get a warrant for that. Wasn't there a time like that?
There was a point. There was one thing, and you remember when I was in New York City at the Cahill firm, I was appointed by Mayor John Lindsay to be the lawyer for all the inmates in the Manhattan House of Correction for men. And in that context, I ended up confronting and debating the Frank Hogan, who was the district attorney in New York City, in Manhattan at that time. And I was being told by the inmates that were in the prison that they had all been subject to these illegal searches, and there was no warrant, and their public defenders wouldn't raise the issue and protect them, because they were criminals. And I investigated this and found out in a major live public television debate with Frank Hogan. I confronted him and I said, would you be willing to tell the host here on ABC television exactly how many warrants have actually been issued in the city of New York in the last 10 years?
None.
Yeah, 2.
2.
2. Yeah. And so the police never use warrants. It's all a crock. It's all television movies and stuff. They're always asserting an emergency situation, the exigency of the circumstances. They didn't have time to get a warrant,
right?
Or else the evidence would have been destroyed, etc. But what's happening now? What we really see happening is that people like Rehnquist and Roberts and Scalia and the others, they're just being completely public about it. That there was a period of time when there was a great effort on the part of the ruling elite in the country to aggressively deceive the great masses of the American people and to make them believe that we were protecting democracy around the world and that we were protecting fundamental rights around the world, and that our foreign aid was being given to countries to promote democracy and all of that kind of stuff. The fact is that they've given up on that. When the split came in Vietnam, when our entire generation was being drafted and under the threat of being sent to federal prison for 20 years, they were being ordered to go 8,000 miles away and parachute into other people's country where they'd been there for 500 generations and kill them. And our whole generation rose up and said, "Hold it 1 minute here. This is not right. It's not true what you're saying." And what we did is we found out that in fact this was a major imperial venture on the part of the ruling elite in our country to try to establish a land base in Asia to get at those markets that they want in China.
Right.
And so that we became aware of what was going on, and we threw down on these people. And there was a major confrontation, as you know, that went on for a full decade, from 1965 to 1975. And at the height of that whole thing, we ended up having the church committee. We were able to mobilize enough of a force on the part of our generation, 82 million strong, to force the Congress to have hearings to look into the criminal activity of the Central Intelligence Agency and their assassination programs. We even got a review opened up of the assassination of President Kennedy. And the House Select Committee on Assassinations made a finding that, in fact, it was probable that President Kennedy had been assassinated by a conspiracy. And the most likely suspects in this were a certain element of organized crime and a certain element of the anti-Castro Miami-based exile community. I know exactly who those guys are. I know by name. I know who they are. And I was told it by Santos Trafficante, who was a client of F. Lee Bailey when I was in his office. I was one of the 3 trial lawyers in F. Lee Bailey's office during the Watergate burglary.
Well, let's come back to that because I want to actually, I want to spend some time on that. Did you mention Frank Church?
Yes.
He's a relative.
Yeah, Frank Church. Frank Church, I'll tell you something you don't know. Frank Church was run out of office in Idaho back in 1980 by millions of dollars being smuggled into the United States from the Nugan Bank in Australia through two specific banks in South Africa into the United States, and funded a major campaign to publicize in the state of Idaho that he in fact supported the Equal Rights Amendment for women and supported gun control. And that's how they got rid of him. That was all choreographed by Theodore G. Shackley, who was the director of covert operations for George H.W. Bush when George Bush was the director of the Central Intelligence Agency from 1975 to 1977. All of that was done. It was all choreographed by Theodore Shackley. And so they got rid of not only Frank Church, but Dick Clark of Iowa and Birch Bayh in Indiana.
Yeah,
they took a pass at Alan Cranston from California.
Right.
That whole thing was choreographed by the chief of covert operations for the Central Intelligence Agency under George Bush.
See, my family, those churches. What are you going to do?
Yeah, right.
So, what can I know that there's no magic wand here, Daniel, but what can we do? I mean, what is it that we can do as a society, as Americans, to get our rights back and to solidify our very basic rights that are guaranteed under the Constitution? How can we protect ourselves from this happening again? It seems we're starting to get it back a little bit, right? Okay.
One of the first things we have to do is use them. You have to use your constitutional rights. It's just like if you sit around on your butt all day long, you're going to get fat and lazy and sloppy, and you're going to get out of shape. You need to, just like you need to walk and exercise and eat properly to stay healthy, you have to exercise your constitutional rights in order to keep them. Most people could say, "No, look, it's okay for them to take my constitutional rights. I wasn't using them anyhow." So what you have to do is use them. And one of the first things people can do, everybody that's out here can do it. What you do is you establish a constitutional protection zone right in your own community, just like we did after winning the Karen Silkwood case and the 3 Mile Island case back in 1979. When we realized that the major Nuclear Regulatory Commission was going to want to start moving nuclear waste materials from the 103 nuclear power plants in the United States, digging them all up from their property and shipping them across the country to put them under Yucca Mountain, what we did is we got city councils throughout the country to pass ordinances declaring their city and county to be a nuclear-free zone, so that it prohibited the transport of radioactive waste materials through their community. And they couldn't bring them through on trucks, they couldn't bring them through on trains, and so basically we froze them and we stopped them. Okay, so right now we have the National Security, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012. It has a provision in it, Section 1021, which specifically authorizes the United States military to take into custody any American citizen anywhere in the country without any probable cause to believe that they've committed a crime of any kind, merely on the basis of a reasonably articulable suspicion on the part of a person designated by the Attorney General of the United States, whom we don't even know the identity of.
Right.
If they have a reasonably articulable suspicion that this person has provided significant support to any person, individual person, who is in any way associated with an organization that is in turn associated with any organization, any member of which is engaged in hostile acts toward the United States or any of our allies, is that such a person who has provided any significant support to even an individual who is associated with a group that is associated with one of those groups can be picked up off the street and renditioned and taken into custody by the United States military and held without any right to make a phone call to anybody in your family to let them know that you've been taken, without the right to have any attorney. Even if you had an attorney handcuffed to you, they couldn't represent you. You're not allowed to contact any attorney. You'll be held indefinitely. They have no obligation to present you to an impartial magistrate, which is the fundamental right of habeas corpus, which is right on the face of the Constitution of the United States, that you have to be presented to an impartial magistrate from the judicial branch to make a determination as to whether or not the state or the federal government has any evidence on the basis of which a reasonable person would come to believe that it's more reasonable than not that you've committed a crime. That's the most fundamental concept of habeas corpus.
Right.
But they have set it aside, and they can hold you indefinitely, and if they decide to try you, they put you in front of a military tribunal. And you have no right to be notified about what the charges are against you. You have no right to be notified about what the evidence is that they have on the basis of which they believe that you gave some significant support to any such person. You have no right to confront your accuser, because if they told you who your accuser was, it might reveal their methods and sources of getting information. This is an absolute fascist, statute.
When I first read about 102.1 of the NDAA, I thought, no, that can't be, right? So I go and I check it out, and sure enough, it's there. And that's frightening enough. But also, this was passed in 2012, and it is
signed by Obama.
Yes, and it is of my opinion that the reason why they allowed the NSA and the Freedom
USA Freedom Act,
the Freedom Act to fall apart, or to allow it to expire, was because they were still resting on the NDAA, and they knew that they had that, and if they had a fallback plan, that most Americans didn't even know that this was even in place.
Oh, no. Most people have no idea what Section 102.1 is all about.
Right.
But what they do is they need to, you ask the question, what can people do? And I've spent a lot of time analyzing this and thinking about this. And the most significant possible thing that any person listening to this radio program can do is they can organize in their own town. They can organize a citizens' movement to establish your town as a constitutional protection zone. And you go to your city council and you ask them to pass an ordinance which guarantees to any person in their community the right to due process. And that if any of their law enforcement officials or any employee of the city or county get any information whatsoever indicating that any federal official or military official is planning to come into your county or city and to place in custody any American citizen under the authority of Section 102.1 of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, that person will be contacted and brought into protective custody and provided the full due process of law.
What's it called again? The Constitution what?
A constitutional protection zone.
Okay. I got it.
That's what people need to do. I can tell you. And then what you need to do is you need to organize the people in your community, because the first thing you'll discover is they have no idea that this law exists. They don't even know about it. And secondly, if you do tell them about it and you show them, they can't possibly believe that it would apply to Americans.
Right.
That's the first thing they try to do. Well, it doesn't apply to Americans. It just applies to foreigners. No, that's not true. And there's a federal district court opinion in New York City that Chris Hedges, and Dana Ellsberg, and Naomi Wolf, and others brought a major federal civil complaint against this statute, and in front of Judge Catherine Forrest, an Obama appointee to the federal bench. And they argued that, look, here is what we do. Chris Hedges and others, we interview people. Chris Hedges was the New York Times reporter for the Middle East, and he interviewed people who were members of Taliban or others to ask them what they're talking about. What are they doing? Why are they doing these things? And so they ask whether or not they're simply interviewing someone from one of those organizations and reporting what they said could be deemed to be providing support for them. And Judge Forrest said, this is going to be easy. We'll just have the U.S. Attorney declare that is not covered. And the U.S. Attorney for the United States District in the Southern District of New York said, no, I'm not going to make that assertion. That would be covered. And so she said, okay, that's it. That's unconstitutional. And the Obama administration, Justice Department, appealed it to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and they reversed it. And they said that no, these people didn't have any standing to really bring this complaint because they hadn't already been picked up. And the fact is, if you're picked up, you're never going to get to talk to anybody after that.
Right.
And so you can't bring any action. So that it's a travesty. It's an absolute travesty, that case. And so, but what it does, very importantly, is it provides you the method of proving to your friends and neighbors that, in fact, it does cover Americans. And, in fact, it does cover simply interviewing somebody that might say something that the United States executive branch doesn't want them to say about the war. You know, and so the fact of the matter is, we need to start organizing these constitutional protection zones all throughout the country. That is how we stop them from shipping the nuclear waste out of those 103 nuclear facilities, and that's how we have to stop them now. Because they believe, you need to remember that during the W. Bush administration, Dick Cheney had a staff of lawyers that included David Addington and John Yoo and the others. John Yoo actually wrote a book called the National Security Constitution. And he made the argument that if the executive branch was engaging in activity of wiretapping people's telephones and eavesdropping on their electronic communications, their emails, you know, their cell phones, if that became known and the American people did not rise up against it, that could be considered common law assent to that program. And he actually argued that it would take on legal effect if you stood by and allowed that statute to remain on the books and you did not rise up against it.
Exactly.
It was considered to be constructive consent on the part of the people.
That's right.
And our people need to rise up against Section 1021. And all you have to do is go to your city council and get them to pass this ordinance. You can contact us here at the Romero Institute here in Santa Cruz. You know, we have a model ordinance, and we're now organizing because, and you don't have to just walk into the chambers and say, here, I'm going to bet on you're going to support this. What you need to do is to go door to door to your neighbors. You know, and it's uncomfortable. People feel uncomfortable about going to their neighbors and knocking on the door and saying, oh, look, did you know about Section 1021? You know, but the fact of the matter is, if you cannot overcome that minimal level of discomfort, you're not going to be protected when they come for you.
I would, if I pulled all of that off, but while they were voting, I would get picked up on the street. I would disappear. I would poof. Do we have there's no way of telling. This is like the very definition of a catch-22, by the way. And it's
yes, it is. Sure is.
It is. And
yeah, you don't have standing unless they've snatched you up, so you can prove that you're
right.
a target.
Yes.
And once they've snatched you up, you can't talk to anybody.
Exactly. It's like Bizarro World. You know, it's like this isn't supposed to exist, but
no, it's absurd. But the fact of the matter is the passivity on the part of our people that they keep citing as the support for what they're doing. And so the right wing reactionaries have got a fully fleshed out worldview. They're rock-ribbed fascists, you know, and they pursue their worldview. And if you stand around shifting from one foot to another, wondering what you're going to do, or you think that they're only going to do it to somebody else and not you, then you have to remember, you know, Reverend Niemöller's famous quote from Germany. You know, that when they passed the law and they came after the Jews, I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't do anything. And then they came after the communists, and I wasn't a communist, so I didn't do anything.
Right.
And then they came after the socialists, and I wasn't even a socialist, so I didn't do anything about it. And then they came for me, and then there were not enough people left to protect me. You know, and what I'm saying is that this is a conscious program that is going on here. They're just like putting the old saying is that if you try to put a frog into a boiling hot water, he'll jump right out. But if you put him in lukewarm water and slowly turn the fire up under him, he'll sit right in there until he cooks. You know, and so what I'm saying is, you know, we are being cooked here. And so people need to make a move right now. They need to mobilize. They need to contact us at the Romero Institute. It's very simple. Just it's the RomeroInstitute.org. And we have a constitutional protection zone. You can go onto our website, of RomeroInstitute.org, and you can find our constitutional protection zone. You'll find the ordinance right there, and you can adopt it and start organizing in your own community.
Did you get it passed in Santa Cruz?
We're in the process of doing it now, because what we're doing is we're mobilizing the community. That we want to, even if the city council just went on and said, "Oh, good, we'll pass that," and they'll sign it and throw it on the table. What we want to do is mobilize everybody in the community so that we have 95% of the people in our community all demanding that they sign this thing. Because that's how you're exercising your rights. If you don't exercise these rights, they will atrophy, and so this is what we need to do. Now, so that's the kind of action assignment that I'm proposing to people, and if you sit down and you say, my mother's horse died, I've got a hangnail,
right,
I can't bother doing that, then that is exactly what they want. That is exactly how they want you to respond. And if you can't respond with full knowledge that this is going on in our country right now, then the fact of the matter is they may be right, that they may well be able to get away with this step by step, but we need to be able to prove them wrong.
How many times have they exercised 1021? Do you have any idea?
You have no idea, because they don't tell anybody.
That's exactly my point.
Yeah, nobody knows. So I mean, we know of the people. Some of the people they renditioned. They just sweep them off the street. They actually shave their head. They cut their clothes off with a straight edge razor. Cut their clothes off and have them be completely nude and put them into a burlap bag, and then tie the burlap bag and throw it in the back of a truck and drive you to an airport and throw you into the hold of an airplane and fly you off to Egypt or to Pakistan or somewhere where they can torture you. And the fact of the matter is that I'm not saying that every single American that would be picked up under this is going to be tortured, but that they insist upon keeping you in a military detention facility where you can be subjected to this enhanced interrogation. In Obama, when he signed these things, he signed a signing statement saying that, and that's why they passed Section 1022. Section 1022 mandates that anybody who is picked up pursuant to Section 1021 has to be kept in a military detention facility. And so they passed 1022 that said, well, the mandate that you be kept in a military detention facility doesn't necessarily have to apply to an American if they're picked up, so that the president can make an exception for you and not have you kept in a military stockade. But, that's small solace,
Yeah, that happened to me in Hollywood in the 1980s, but that's I kind of enjoyed it. But that's another story. That's a whole nother show. You're supposed to laugh at that point, Daniel. Sure. Hollywood, the 1980s. We're going to be up against a break here in a second, and I knew that we would do this, and thank you for doing this. We went totally off topic for an hour, and we never got back to Ratzinger, and that's why this show and you are special. But the fact that we allowed this to happen, and under the guise of, and I was there too, Daniel, I have to admit that after 2001 and 9/11, everybody was pretty freaked out and was looking at your neighbors strange, and we didn't know what was going on. And at that point, they had us right where they wanted us. Now we're weak and we'll agree to anything. And it seemed like almost like it was a plan that just fell into place. And it was just like the evolutionary step. It was the next step to get the NSA to be able to, no more warrants. We could arrest anybody on the streets that we want. There's no due process. And we're doing it because you guys are scared, and we're here to protect you. And we went right along with the punches, and we allowed it to happen. And nobody questioned anything. I don't think anybody at that point, not the mass media, no boots on the street journalists or investigate, and nothing happened. It was just like we just let it go. Was it just because of fear?
No. I think that that people, even though people had been trained through the Iran-Contra scandal, in Watergate, and in other events that I happen to have been privileged to participate in and share with the American public what was really going on behind the scenes, our American people had started to become aware of the fact that they shouldn't believe their government. It's one of the first lessons of the Founding Fathers is, do not place blind trust in your political leadership. Be wary of them, be critical of them, constantly check them to determine whether or not they're telling you the truth, etc. That's what the Bill of Rights is for. That's what the Bill of Rights is all about. It was drafted by revolutionaries that rose up against the royalist government in England and against the elite and the ecclesial leadership. This relationship between the ecclesial leaders, the church leaders, and the state is exactly what we rose up against here in the colonies. And they tell us, do not trust these people. And that's what the Constitution is all about. So we had people starting to become trained to not trust their what they were saying. And the fact of the matter is, people there was a substantial portion of the people in the country that, as of 2001, did not believe that George H.W. Bush won the election in the year 2000. As we know, we talked about Bush v. Gore, in the Supreme Court, that there was a substantial number of people that didn't believe that Bush was the legitimate president. And the fact of the matter was, he started, undertaking these kind of reactionary programs during the first 6 months that he was in there, from January of 2001, down into the fall of 2001. And the Democratic Party were collectively licking their chops, waiting to get this guy out of office. They said, just wait till the next election comes around. We're going to toss this guy out on his ear. And the fact of the matter is, when the major events of September, of 2001 occurred, there was an absolute immediate snapback that basically, they weren't going to question what the government was doing in order to, quote, protect them. And so that they actually put out this absolutely ridiculous report of the 9/11 events, which anybody with a political IQ above room temperature, reading it says, that didn't happen. This isn't likely to have happened. But they just lay out this kind of simple scenario of how this whole thing came down, and they ignore an entire dimension of undercarriage on all that event, and people don't want to look at it, don't want to question it. They say, oh, gee, all the airplanes were ordered to stand down, except for a number of airplanes that were taking all of Osama bin Laden's people out of the country. and here's building number 7. The city didn't get hit by any plane, anything at all, and it basically collapses right down, right into its footprint. And and people go, well, I'm not going to say anything about that either.
Well, yeah. You do one thing well. And you define conspiracy like nobody else. And I'm going to have you do that after the break. We're up against a break. But when we talk about 9/11, is that now a true definition for you of a conspiracy?
Well, we'll have to talk about it after the break.
I knew there wasn't enough time to get there. But, when we come back off of the break, I would like for you to share with everybody your definition of a conspiracy and how it applies to a few different aspects of recent history here in the United States. And you do it oh so well. Thank you so much. Let's head to a break. Tonight, Daniel Sheehan is with us. When we come back, you're going to get to hear his definition of conspiracy. And sit back, buckle up. It's going to be good. Stay right there, Daniel. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. We'll be back in 2.
KGRA Radio. Intelligent talk.
Are you a paranormal investigator, ghost hunter, or UFO skywatcher? If so, FNGinnovations.com has the product you definitely need in your investigations kit or go bag. Introducing the Morpholite Wide Beam Tactical Flashlights that put the light where you need it most. Traditional flashlights shine a focused round beam with limited line of sight in the dark. Morpholite Tactical Flashlights change all that, utilizing a revolutionary wide beam design to enable you to see safety hazards such as hanging wires and steel, pipes, and holes in the floor you just can't see with a focused round beam. In the field, where safety is paramount, a 180-degree beam increases orientation and peripheral vision in the dark. Morpholite flashlights are ideal for investigations in abandoned facilities such as houses and hospitals, factories, caves, and tunnels. Avoid those low-hanging tree branches that poke your eyes in the woods. Visit FNGinnovations.com to see a full line of tactical lights and accessories. That's FNGinnovations.com.
Now you can find all your favorite talk radio shows live, all in one place at TalkStreamLive.com. Listen from anywhere, office, home, or in your car. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com and click on one of the many live talk show hosts you want to listen to. It's free and easy. No computer? Download the smartphone apps. Never miss your favorite talk show. Find them all at TalkStreamLive.com.
Hey everybody, what's up? Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and check this out. The 2015 MUFON Symposium will be held this September 24th through the 27th in beautiful downtown Irvine, California. Expanding ufology, opening new doors in academia, industry, and media. Former Defense Minister of Canada Paul Hellyer will be there in person. Former CNN news anchor Cheryl Jones, TV news journalist Jaime Maussan, and MUFON's chief photo analyst Mark D'Antonio. They're just a few of the growing list of names for the 2015 event. It's September 24th through the 27th at the beautiful Hotel Irvine. Get your tickets today at MUFONSymposium.com. That's MUFONSymposium.com. Go Beckley Tepe.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why fade to black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
All right, welcome back, Fade to Black, the Tuesday edition. Tonight, Daniel Sheehan is with us, activist, attorney, man of the world. What a great conversation tonight. As I promised before the break, I'm going to ask Daniel right now. Daniel, give us your definition of a conspiracy.
Well, remember, conspiracy comes, again, from the Latin root conspiritu, which means, literally, to breathe together. That's what it comes from. And it has to do with planning consciously to achieve a certain common end of a group of people, two or more people. And it's just exactly like if you go out to the local recreation field and you put 11 people together and say, here, there's 11 on our side and 11 on your side, and let's play a game of touch football. And you all come up to the line and say, here, hike the ball to me, and you all just run around, and then I'll throw you the ball. That team is going to get beaten every time by a team that comes together, works out a certain set number of plays. They have signals where they call the plays. They're familiar with what the defenses are the other side has. They're going to win every single time because they're intelligent and they plan. They breathe together. They come together in the huddle and they breathe together, and then they come up with a common plan and they execute it. Now, there's a common law doctrine of conspiracy, which means two or more people planning together to commit a crime. And that if any one of the people that's involved in entering into the agreement to commit the crime together, if that person engages in an overt act that is undertaken pursuant to the effectuation of the criminal objectives of that agreement, then that person is guilty of participating in the conspiracy, and they're guilty of the same actions that any other person takes pursuant to their common agreement. That's the conspiracy. And I've spent my time actually prosecuting conspiracies as a civilian lawyer. I'm a people's lawyer. That's why they named the book that they asked me to write at Counterpoint Press is the People's Advocate. Is that I am a private investigator and private prosecuting attorney that prosecutes conspiracies against the people. And I encountered these things as I just have encountered them one after another throughout my life here. But the very first case that was brought to us when I was the editor, the co-founding editor with Mark Green of the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review, the first case that came to me, John Flynn, a young lawyer in Boston, brought me a case. It turns out that the Boston Police Department hated the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party had the Black Panther newspaper, and they used to have, drawings on the front page, of the police looking like pigs, in police uniforms and stuff, and the police hated them. And so it turns out that every time that a drugstore or something got robbed in Boston, and the suspect was described as a young black male, the Boston police would go around and they would arrest every single one of the young black men that were selling the Panther newspaper on the street corners. And they would arrest them on suspicion of them having been the young black male that committed this crime. And they would take them into custody, and they would put them in lineups all day long, hoping that someone would mistakenly identify them as the perpetrator of whatever the crime was for which that lineup had been designed. And then it would come to the next morning when they were going to have to present them in front of an independent magistrate because of the right of habeas corpus that people had that required the state to bring that person before an independent magistrate and present to the magistrate evidence that showed that there was probable cause that they had committed a crime. As soon as it came time the next morning, after keeping them there all night, they would release them from custody, and all of the Black Panther newspapers had mysteriously disappeared that they had seized. And so that it was clear that there was a conspiracy going on. There was a coordinated effort on the part of the Boston Police Department, at its highest levels, to illegally arrest these young men who were selling the Black Panther newspaper. So I brought the action on. I was contacted by John Flynn. We drafted up the federal civil complaint seeking the declaratory judgment and an injunction against them. And in that particular case, I alleged that there was a conspiracy there because this wasn't a coincidence. It kept happening over and over again. And so that we won the federal declaratory judgment and got the injunction against them. When it happened over and over again, and so I ended up when I ended up going to the Cahill Gordon firm out of Harvard Law School, and they brought us the Pentagon Papers case. I was one of the few people that actually got to read all 47 volumes of the Pentagon Papers that Neil Sheehan, no relation, had gotten from Dan Ellsberg. And so, I was reading through the papers, and here it was. It was perfectly obvious that the entire waging of the Vietnam War was, in fact, a criminal conspiracy at the highest levels of the American administrations, the Eisenhower Nixon administration, the Kennedy Johnson administration, the Johnson administration, the Nixon administration. They were all involved in a criminal conspiracy to invade and occupy the foreign country, to set up a completely artificial government that did not exist, the government of, quote, South Vietnam, It was a complete violation of the 1954 Geneva Accords that prohibited the recognition of any government in South Vietnam separate from the Vietnamese government. And they were lying about it, and they knew they were lying about it, and that they completely fabricated the information about the Vietnamese military patrol boats firing on the Turner Joy. In the USS Henry Knox, and that it was completely false, and they knew it, but they just said it because they wanted to rile up the American people. What it was is that the Henry Knox was patrolling offshore in North Vietnam, firing their guns onto the shore, and all that happened is one of the patrol boats came out from the harbor toward the ship, and they said, okay, that's enough. Let's say they fired at us, and they lied about it, and Johnson knew they were lying, and Johnson lied to the United States Congress to get the Bay of Tonkin resolution passed. And then they flogged that resolution around to justify sending in eventually, 500,000 United States military people to try to invade the place and occupy it. They were killing civilians. They had a massive assassination program going on, a clear criminal conspiracy, the Phoenix program under the direction of Theodore G. Shackley, the CIA station chief in Saigon. They had massive heroin smuggling going on, opium smuggling going on, again under the direction of Theodore Shackley. And with Bang Pao, we have the details of the agreement they made. And so I knew all of this by the time I was 25 years old. And so I knew that they were doing these kind of things. And so when I went to F. Lee Bailey's office and we saw the Watergate burglary, it was perfectly obvious to me that this was a conspiracy. That wasn't just a group of guys that got together and happened to wander into the Democratic National office, headquarters. That it was a conspiracy. And the fact that four of these guys were all former gunmen for Sandro Trafficante, the Don of the Mafia in Havana, should have caused somebody suspicion. What are these people doing there? Why are they in there? And yet the United States Congress, when we finally beat up on them to get them to hold the hearings on this, they all pretended it was just too complicated. They couldn't quite figure out why they were all in there.
Yeah,
it just seemed like a ridiculous thing.
Those guys were doing bad things for over a decade.
That's right. They were burglarizing. They burglarized Dan Ellsberg's office. They were ordered by Nixon to set a fire, over at one of the other institutes. It was perfectly clear that Richard Nixon was a criminal, and he had a classic criminal mentality, and that these people were all criminals that were working for him. And then it started becoming obvious that the United States Central Intelligence Agency was engaging in massive criminal conduct, in violation of the restrictions of the National Security Act of 1947, and they were engaging in not only political assassinations around the world, pursuant to a clearly designed conspiracy to do that. They were smuggling heroin from Southeast Asia through Cuba. We found the name of the guy, Paul Helliwell, who was running a thing called the Sea Supply Corporation, SEA, Southeast Asian Supply Corporation. We knew that they were smuggling heroin in, and they were working with the mafia, with Santos Trafficante and Batista. That I could go on and on. But the fact of the matter is that these criminal operations that are going on are pursuant to a clearly coordinated criminal plan, and that the alliance between the Central Intelligence Agency and the mafia was very clearly so. And the silly thing about it is that the vast majority of people in the United States, if you say to them that the mafia was directly involved with the Central Intelligence Agency in smuggling heroin into the United States, that 3/4 of the people will think you're crazy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Because it just can't be true.
No.
Because if it were true, then their entire worldview
collapses.
Would be wrong.
Yeah, it collapses.
And they would actually have to find out what's going on in the world. And as long as they have a job, can send their kids to school and have 2 cars and a color television set in each of the rooms, people don't want to question, what the system is that's providing that kind of a lifestyle for them. But when in fact it starts to come unraveled, and more people are losing their jobs, and more people are being put on unemployment, more people are losing their health benefits, then they start to wonder what's going on, and they're prepared to start looking around a little bit more intensely. And what we want to do is we want to share with them the information that we've learned over the last 40 years, and that's why I've been asked to write the books. I've written The People's Advocate, which is the first of the 3 books. I'm writing a second book now that's called Rulers of the Realm. And then I'll be writing a third book for Counterpoint Press, which is The Dream Fulfilled, that actually explains to us what in the world we can do about this.
Well, let me ask you this. This is a yes or no question. Do your best just to say yes or no.
Sure.
Okay? Have we ever had a clean administration that wasn't involved in the darkest conspiracy known to mankind?
Yes. The Clinton, or excuse me, not the Clinton, but the Carter administration. That was why they threw him out.
You know what? You're right. You might be right.
Jimmy Carter was a decent and honest man, and he was handpicked by was it Robert? The head of the Democratic National Committee, to come into the presidency right after Richard Nixon had articles of impeachment returned against him, and he resigned, or else he clearly would have been impeached and thrown out of office. They brought in Gerald Ford to take his place so he could give him a pardon, as part of a clear criminal conspiracy. But in fact, Ford had been part of conspiracies for years because he was on the Warren Commission.
Yes.
And they clearly conspired to conceal what happened in the Kennedy assassination. So he was the right guy to pick, and they put him in. And so we bounced him out because of him having given the pardon to Nixon. And in comes Jimmy Carter, clean, honest, decent guy. Comes into the White House. We had met with him earlier. That I actually organized the meeting of the top 54 major religious denominations in Washington. We sat down with him and Stu Eisenstadt, his chief policy guy, and we got Carter to agree that if he were elected president, he would sign an executive order cutting off all United States military assistance to any foreign dictator who was determined to be engaged in the systematic violation of the human rights of his own citizens. That's how we got the military funding cut off to Anastasio Somoza in Nicaragua.
But he did give away the Panama Canal. That wasn't cool.
Well, but no, there's no giving away. It wasn't theirs to begin with. It's not giving it away. It's preposterous. It was Cromwell, who was the senior partner of Sullivan and Cromwell, on behalf of the United Fruit Corporation and Brown Brothers Harriman, that put the canal in. And enslaved, thousands of people to do it, died of malaria to do this thing. It was all done for the basic, financial clients of Brown Brothers Harriman. There's no giving it away. He simply, like any decent human being would have done, is refrained from continuing to militarily occupy the area.
Well, I lived in Panama when all of that happened. Mondale came down. Mondale was literally in my backyard, signing away the treaties, and it was a dark period. And the reason why I even say that in such a cavalier way is, unless you were there and to see what we had built down there, Panama was beautiful. The canal zone was insanely perfect. It was like Shangri-La. And the American citizens that lived down there and worked for the Canal Zone Corporation, the CZC, it was a way of life that was
it was a way of life that was not entirely unlike the British in India. They had a great lifestyle too.
Yes,
they lived with the Raj, and they had their own servants, and they had their own compounds, and they imported their own food and stuff from the East India Company.
Yep.
This has gone on for years, Jimmy.
Yes.
That's exactly what colonialism looks like.
And when they were obviously so freaked out down there, you can't give this away. it's a way of life for us. Well, there was a generation or two of families that had been established down there.
No, that was the same thing with the British Raj in India.
Yes.
They were horrified at the whole idea of the British actually pulling out of India.
Right.
That they'd been there for two different generations of military commanders and everything. It was very traumatic. And there's no doubt that that some of the South Vietnamese were all upset about the fact that the United States pulled out of there. But the United States didn't pull out voluntarily. They came out hanging on the bottom of helicopters. We need to understand that we live in and receive the benefits from a major international imperialist power. Just exactly like Rome, just exactly like Germany. It tried to assert its control over all of Europe. These are classic activities of the Caucasians that we tend to do this kind of thing.
Backing up, and I try to avoid politics on this show, but nobody likes a good story more than a good conspiracy, and it seems like out of all of the cats, and I'm talking about Bush and some of our recent administrations, certainly Clinton had his dark days, and Obama and Bush, but and backing up, Nixon was a really bad guy. Going back to Eisenhower,
yes,
he was diabolical, man. He really,
that's right.
Yeah,
he was malevolent and malignant
completely. He let it all go to his head. And he really thought that he could do whatever he wanted. Even as vice president, he was pulling strings.
No, that's right. No, he chaired the 5412 Committee of the National Security Council.
That's right.
It was in charge of overseeing all covert operations.
Do you think anybody was darker than Nixon?
Well, Lyndon Johnson was a pretty malevolent guy.
Yeah,
he was.
Yeah,
both of those guys are pretty well close to winning a prize.
I can't. One of these days, you and I are going to go out to dinner and get some red wine, and I can only imagine what that conversation is going to do. But when we talk about Nixon. And his involvement, somebody had just tweeted about JFK, and I didn't really want to go there tonight. You've spoken about it so many times, but let's back up for a second. When it comes
actually, I taught an entire class of 20 lectures on the Kennedy assassination, which are on our website at the Romero Institute. It's a class I taught. It's the first and only class ever taught at the college university level about the Kennedy assassination. It presents all of the alternative theories of the Kennedy assassination. So people can see it for free if they want to just come to the RomeroInstitute.org, and they can find it under events. It's got the classes right there.
Let's do just that for a second. When we talk about Nixon, most people don't associate him with JFK.
Oh yeah,
and it's the exact opposite. 180 degrees. Let's flip that baby over and look underneath it, and you see Nixon's face. Did it all start? Was he the progenitor of the downfall? Camelot. Does it all point to him?
No. It's Allen Dulles.
Okay.
Allen Dulles was the consigliere for the group of people that were in Brown Brothers Harriman, the CEO of which who was George Herbert Walker.
And okay, let's start there then. And when because Nixon, I want to let you tell the story because you tell it so well. But Nixon was instrumental in picking up the phone and getting some things done when it came to Kennedy, and some plans in Havana, and it had things. Well, let's start there. Let's start with Dulles and Nixon's involvement and how that got off the ground.
Well, actually, Richard Nixon is the one who initiated the putting together of an assassination team that was actually intended and trained to kill Fidel Castro.
And that's what I meant.
And Raul Castro.
That's what
and Che Guevara That was their purpose, the S-Force. I've talked to guys that were on the S-Force, Rafael Chichi Quintero, and the guys, they were actually trained by Carl Jenkins down at the in Oaxaca, Mexico, at the ranch of Clint Murchison Jr. They were trained to assassinate Fidel Castro. That was their mission, and that's what Richard Nixon had them put together to do. And that's what Santos Trafficante put together the team at the request of Nixon to actually kill Castro in the Comandantes. That was their job. The fact is that happens to be the group that turned and did a 180 and killed the president because he shut down their bases that had been created all through the southeastern United States on No Name Key and Swan Island in the Everglades, and two of them at Lake Pontchartrain in Louisiana. Those bases were manned by anti-Castro Cuban exiles that had fled from Cuba in January of '59 after Batista was overthrown by Castro, and that it was the shutting down of those bases by Kennedy after the Cuban Missile Crisis had come right to that brink of total thermonuclear war, and he stood down those bases and ordered them to disband, and they didn't. And in fact, Frank Sturgis from No Name Key, actually launched a military attack against Cuba after the Cuban Missile Crisis, during the period, the most sensitive period, when Kennedy and Khrushchev were negotiating to get that stopped, and they didn't care whether there was a thermonuclear war. That these Cuban exiles, Rafael Chichi Quintero, Felix Rodriguez, Rolando Martinez, all these guys, there were 15 of them that were part of that S-Force. And they were furious that Kennedy had not only ordered them to stand down, but when they launched this unauthorized military attack against Cuba, he actually had them arrested by United States Marshals and held them to have them prosecuted under for a violation of the Neutrality Act. And that was when they resolved that they were going to kill him. Now, we got this information directly from Santos Trafficante, who happened to be one of our clients at F. Lee Bailey's office. So we know exactly what it is that happened. And but the question is who all green-lighted that? Who is it that authorized them to do that once they decided to do it? The S-Force itself, just those 15 guys, didn't pull the thing off by themselves. That thing was green-lighted from above. And it worked its way on up through the channels and came all the way up through David Atlee Phillips and David Morales and the guys that were in the Miami station, which means that it passed through Theodore Shackley, who was the CIA station chief in JM Wave, and it worked its way on up through. But the whole operation was green-lighted by Alan Dulles. But not as a disgruntled CIA guy who got fired as the director of the CIA, but he was made the director of the CIA because of who he was. He was the lawyer for Brown Brothers Harriman and a senior partner at Sullivan and Cromwell. And what you really need to do, you want to talk about a conspiracy. You need to look back and understand, and people understand this, but Alan Dulles was the grandson of John W. Foster. John W. Foster was the Secretary of State under Harriman, William Harrison, in 1893. He's the one that oversaw the whole taking of the Hawaiian Islands and the Philippines and Guam, etc. They were planning the plan to take over in 1898 Cuba. That's the grandfather of Alan Dulles, and he trained Alan Dulles. And John W. Foster's older daughter married Robert Lansing, who became the Secretary of State under Woodrow Wilson. And Woodrow Wilson brought in Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles, his nephews, to actually sit with him during the Versailles Treaty negotiations at the end of World War I. They are the two lawyers that drafted the reparations mandates on Germany to make them pay back the reparations of the damage they performed against certain corporations that were clients of Brown Brothers Harriman, whom Alan Dulles was the lawyer for. And after they put the reparations provisions into the Treaty of Versailles, Robert Lansing, the Secretary of State under Wilson, got Alan Dulles appointed to be the lawyer for the German government. And so they ended up getting the clients from Brown Brothers Harriman to actually give the loans to Germany to pay back the reparations to other clients of Brown Brothers Harriman. And so that's who Alan Dulles was. Alan Dulles was the lawyer for those guys. And all of those people are the ones that actually, between the end of World War I, when he was doing all of this, and the CEO of Brown Brothers Harriman, whom he was the lawyer for, George Herbert Walker. George Herbert Walker set up the Union Bank of New York and got members of the clients, the investment clients of Brown Brothers Harriman, to put part of their money in the Union Bank of New York. They transferred the money into one of their branch offices up in the Netherlands, the Bank of Credit, the Bank of Shipping and Commerce, and they financed the construction of the international headquarters of the Nazi Party. They're the ones that actually funded Adolf Hitler and brought him to power in Germany to establish him as the bulwark against Bolshevism in Europe. That entire group of people working with Alan Dulles funded the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany and funded them all the way through and rebuilding their entire armaments to establish them as the military power in Europe. So, you know, I mean, this is talk about breathing together. Right. I mean,
not only that, and then here we have the same core group of guys, and then you can throw in Nixon, and that's why I said Nixon was kind of like the progenitor of what happened over the next 10 years.
Nixon was handpicked to run for the United States Congress in California by Prescott Bush.
Exactly.
Who was the son-in-law of George Herbert Walker, who was the CEO for Brown Brothers Harriman. And when George Herbert Walker left to go run the Union Bank of New York to fund the rise of the Nazi Party, his son-in-law, Prescott Bush, became the CEO for Brown Brothers Harriman. He handpicked Richard Nixon to run for the congressional seat out in California at the end of World War II. I mean, these people all put their pants on one leg at a time, Jimmy. You know, when you track them down and know who they are and know who their relatives are and who their family members are, you know exactly what these people are doing. That's why they got upset about us, who we were. We spend our time figuring out who these guys are and what they're doing.
Let's take our last break. We're going to do an encore. I'm going to get you to hang on for about 10 minutes.
Sure.
And then we're going to tie this whole thing together and how it went all the way to Watergate. You got to love this story. The definition of a conspiracy. Thank you, Dan. We'll be back right after this. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
Attention, all Fader Knots. Studio Dome has a special deal on their SD1 Bluetooth speaker. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on their banner, enter the promo code Jimmy, and you get $40 off and free shipping on the SD1. It's voice activated, comes with a USB antenna, cables, and a carry bag. Never listen to your phone, tablet, or laptop speakers ever again. It's the only way to listen to Fade to Black. That's jimmychurchradio.com, Studio Dome banner, promo code Jimmy. Go Beckley Teppy.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way. KGRARadio.com.
Hey, everybody, what's up? Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and check this out. The 2015 MUFON Symposium will be held this September 24th through the 27th in beautiful downtown Irvine, California. Expanding ufology, opening new doors in academia, industry, and media. Former Defense Minister of Canada Paul Hellyer will be there in person. Former CNN news anchor Cheryl Jones, TV news journalist Jaime Maussan, and MUFON's chief photo analyst Mark D'Antonio. They're just a few of the growing list of names for the 2015 event. It's September 24th through the 27th at the beautiful Hotel Irvine. Get your tickets today at MUFONSymposium.com. That's MUFONSymposium.com. Go Beckley Teppy.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Fade to Black, the Tuesday edition. Tonight, Daniel Sheehan is with us. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Bespoke Radio for the Masses, the real deal, the true definition of bespoke. Daniel, before the break, as we were tying all of this together, one of the great conspiracies, and I'm not even sure what the greatest conspiracy of our lifetimes would be, whether it would be...
no, I know what it is.
Do you think it's JFK, or do you think it's 9/11?
No, I'll take it. Let me tell you the story quickly. Okay, that the Friday when we filed the Iran-Contra federal racketeering complaint against the off-the-shelf enterprise of Oliver North and the rest of the guys, that Friday afternoon, May 28th of 1986. You know, the following Monday morning, I was at my office on Capitol Hill, and I get a direct call from James Lawrence King, who is the chief federal judge in Miami, and he calls and tells me, he says, I've got your complaint sitting here on my desk right now. I've decided to take this complaint myself as the chief judge because of the complexity of it, and I want to let you know that I'm going to enter a summary judgment against this complaint if you're not in front of my bench here by 2 o'clock today. And this was 10 o'clock in the morning, right? So I run down to the National Airport and jump on a plane and take off and go to Miami, and I come hook sliding into his courtroom a little before 2 o'clock, and there, sitting in front of him, he's on the bench, sitting on the bench, robed on the bench, and 26 lawyers are sitting there on Monday afternoon after the Friday 4:30 p.m. filing of the complaint. And he said, Mr. Sheehan, I wanted just to introduce you to the lawyers that are going to be representing the defendants in this case. The chief defense attorney for them all, who's going to be representing Adolfo Calero, whom you in your complaint allege to be the head of the FDN Contras. This is Mr. Anthony Lapham. And I said to myself, Anthony Lapham, why does I know that guy? And I said, that's right. He was chief counsel for the Central Intelligence Agency under George H.W. Bush, when he was the director of the CIA from 1975 to 1977. And then he said, and Judge King said, okay, and here representing Ronald Joseph Martin, who's the head of the Tamiami gun shop, whom you allege in your complaint to be providing the false end-user certificates for all this military equipment being smuggled out of the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood Airport down to Ilopango to the Contras, representing Mr. Ronald Joseph Martin is going to be Mr. Williams. You may recognize his name, too, because he, in fact, was the head of the criminal division of the United States Justice Department here, U.S. Attorney's Office, until last Friday at 5 o'clock, when he decided to retire and go into private practice to be representing, he said, I said, professional criminals, Your Honor, I think is the term you're looking for. And he said, okay, Mr. Sheehan, that's enough of that. He said, I know about you, and I want to make it clear that I've placed this complaint under seal, and I'm putting a gag order on you. And if you so much as breathe a word about the existence of this complaint, much less any of the claims that are made in it, I will put you in federal prison for 6 months for criminal contempt of this court. And I said, really? I said, exactly what makes you think you have the authority to do that? And he said, well, he said, you may not be familiar with the federal rules of civil procedure we have here in Miami. I said, well, I assume they're the same federal rules of civil procedure that apply everywhere, which, in fact, my professor of civil procedure, Mr. Shapiro, actually wrote, and my class helped write these things. So I assume you're talking about the provision that authorizes a judge to exercise his discretion to protect a jury against adverse publicity, but this certainly doesn't give you the scope to do something like that. He said, well, I just wanted to make it clear that that's why I wanted you here in person so there wouldn't be any doubt about this, that I will put you in prison if you tell anyone about this case. So I said, well, I just want to let you know that I don't intend to abide by that law. Are we done here? And he said, yes. So I got up and left, and I went back to Washington. The very next morning, I called Russ Hemingway, who's an old friend of mine, who was a friend of John Kennedy's. They were in the Navy together, and he's the head of the Fund for an Effective Congress in New York, and a friend of mine who chaired the Fund for Constitutional Government in Washington before I did. And I told him what had happened, and he said, look, I'm going to have you go see Tip O'Neill right now, who was the Speaker of the House at the time, the Democratic Speaker of the House. He said, I'm going to call him right now. You just go on over and see him. He'll be waiting for you, and you tell him what happened here. So I go over to see Tip O'Neill, and I come into his office, and there he is sitting there with his chief of staff in a wheelchair, this guy. And I give him a copy of the complaint, and I explain to him what's in it. He looks through it, and he says, these are impeachable offenses. He said, this is a violation of the Boland Amendment that we passed back in March of '84. He said, this is June 2nd of 1986 when this is happening. And so he says, look, we're in charge of the House of Representatives right now, but even if Peter Rodino, who chairs the Judiciary Committee still, were to return articles of impeachment against these guys, the Republicans control the Senate, so they would never convict on this. So I'll tell you what we're going to do is that if we can retake the Senate here in the fall, in November of 1986, he said, then I'll propose that we set up a special select committee in the Senate, in the Foreign Relations Committee, so you to investigate all of this. So I want you to go on over now. We'll make a couple copies of the complaint here. You bring a copy over to Claiborne Pell. He's the ranking Democrat, the senator from Rhode Island. So he's the ranking Democrat up there now, and he would be the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee if we win back in the fall, the Senate. He said, so I want you to go on over there right now, bring a copy of the complaint and give it to him, and tell him that you want him to agree to set up a special select committee in the Senate to investigate these charges that you got here in the complaint if we win the Senate back. And he's going to ask you, Dan, he said, he's going to ask you, who do you think ought to chair that committee? And you tell him John Kerry from Massachusetts. You tell him that. He loves John Kerry. He said, we all kid this guy. We kid him that John Kerry must be his illegitimate son. He loves him so much. He said, he thinks he's going to be president of the United States. I said, well, that's funny. I said, so does John Kerry. I said, so he said, look, so I go over and I see Claiborne Powell, and I give him a copy of the complaint, and he asked me who I think ought to chair the special select committee, and I tell him John Kerry. He's totally delighted, right? I turn around and I go back to my office. I go back over to the office down by Union Station at North Capitol Street, 1324 North Capitol. I go back to our office. I walk in. My secretary, Patty Austin, says, Danny, there's an older gentleman here to see you. And I said, well, who is it? She said, I don't know. He didn't give me his name. I said, well, where is he? He said, he's up in your office waiting for you. So I go upstairs and I walk into my office, and here's this guy sitting there. He's probably maybe 70 years old or so. And he's sitting there all in mufti, these khaki pants and, kind of a safari shirt and hat. And he's got this hemp briefcase back with him. And so I walk over and I shake his hand. I said, hi, I'm Dan Sheehan. And he said, yes, thank you, Mr. Sheehan, for seeing me. He didn't tell me who he was. And I walk around, I sit down at my desk, and he's sitting there, and he says, look, you don't know who I am. I said, yeah, I noticed. You didn't tell me who you were. And he said, but look, I've got a couple of questions for you, and if you don't have to answer them, but if you choose to answer them, I might be able to help you here. And he said, and he reaches in his little hemp briefcase, and he takes out a copy of the complaint, right? And he says, I have a copy of your complaint here. And he said, I'd like to ask you, just say, can you tell me of these 26 defendants that you've named here, who do you think is the most important of all of these defendants? And I said, oh, that's easy. I said, it's Theodore G. Shackley. He said, oh, Theodore Shackley. He said, why do you say that? And I said, well, a lot of people would think it was because he was the ADDO, the Associate Deputy Director for Operations, in charge of covert operations for the CIA under George H.W. Bush, when Bush was the director of the CIA from 1975 to 77, who's now the vice president. And his vice presidential national security advisor, Donald P. Gregg, who worked under Shackley back in 75 to 77, was in fact the CIA case officer for Felix Rodriguez, who's running the Ilopango air operation, supplying the military equipment to the Contras in violation of the Boland Amendment. I said, so a lot of people would think that's why I would have thought he was the most important. And he looks at me and he said, but that's not it? That's not the reason you think he's the most important? I said, no. He said, well, what is it? Why is he? Why do you think he's the most important? I said, because he was the Miami bureau chief of the CIA on November 22nd of 1963.
Bingo.
And he looked at me and he said, there aren't 5 men in the world that would have answered the question that way. And he gets up and walks across the room and sticks his hand out and said, my name is Dick Billings. I was the chief staff investigator and the chief staff writer for the House Select Committee on Assassinations. I think you and I can help each other out here.
Wow. Okay, now at that point, now I've never heard this story, and thank you for sharing this, but at that point, you've got to ask Billings a question. What was it?
Oh, no. He asked me the question. What he said, there's a guy that wants to meet with you. He's got something important to tell you. Would you be willing to meet with him tomorrow? And I said, sure. And he said, where to make you comfortable, where would you like to meet so you feel comfortable? I said, well, let's meet at the Dubliner Cafe, right at the bottom of the hill here at noontime tomorrow. He said, okay. So the next day, I go over to the Dubliner Cafe at noontime, and there's Dick Billings waiting out front.
Right.
I walk up and shake his hand. We walk in, and here's this guy sitting at a table all by himself, another guy about maybe 70 years old or so. And I walk over to him, and Dick Billings walks over and says, Dan Sheehan, Joe Smith, he says. And I reach out my hand and I say, yeah, great, Joe Smith. He said, no, I get that a lot. He said, my name is Joseph Burkholder Smith. I was the deputy CIA station chief in Mexico City back in 1973 when Theodore Shackley was removed as CIA station chief in Saigon and brought to become the head of Western Hemisphere operations. He said, so I was there when Shackley removed all of the CIA station chiefs in all of the Western Hemisphere and put all of his own men in place. So he put a guy by the name of Tom Polgar in as the new station chief in Mexico City. And the next morning, Tom Polgar walks into my office and says, Joe, I don't know if I'm going to be able to leave you on here as my deputy. He said, but I'll tell you what, there's going to be a guy come in to see you tomorrow about 10 o'clock in the morning. You'll recognize who he is, and he's going to ask you some questions. And he may even want you to go and meet some other people who have some questions for you. And depending on how you answer those questions, that'll determine whether or not you're going to be left on as my deputy here. So the next morning, he says, I'm sitting here talking to Joseph Burkholder Smith with Dick Billings sitting right next to me in the Dubliner Cafe. This is now June 3rd of 1986, just 5 days after we filed the Iran-Contra complaint. And so Joseph Burkholder Smith says to me, the next morning, he said, at like 10 o'clock, into my office walks Nasser Haro, who's the head of the DFS in Mexico, which is sort of the combination FBI and CIA in Mexico.
Right.
And so he walks into my office and he says, Joe, I imagine that Polgar told you I was going to come see you. And Joe says, well, I didn't know who it was going to be, but I recognize who you are. He said, I'd like to have you come with me if you would. There's some people that got some questions for you. And you don't have to answer them, but depending on how you answer those questions, that may determine whether you're going to be left on as the CIA deputy station chief here. So he said, I went with him. We go downstairs. We get in this SUV with the smoke-tinted windows, and we drive to Mexico City Airport. We go completely around security, and we get in this Learjet. We fly away, and we fly, and we end up landing in Buenos Aires in Argentina. I get out of the plane, and I follow Nasser Haro around. We go around security, get into a helicopter, and fly away. We fly all the way up to the northwesternmost tip of Argentina, and we land on this soccer field. And it's like in this little town called Salta. And I get out of the helicopter, and I follow Nasser Haro across this big soccer field, and we go up this embankment. I look over the embankment, and he said, I thought I was in Bavaria, he said. I looked down into this little town, and he takes me down into the little town. We walk into this Bavarian inn, and here are these 6 guys sitting at this big oaken table in front of a big stone fireplace. And over the mantle of the fireplace is a big swastika flag, right? This is 1973. And he said, the guy in the center, these 6 guys gestured to me to sit down in the one chair that was on my side of the table. I sit down, and the guy said to me, he says, Joe, I imagine you've been told that we have some questions here for you, and depending on how you answer these questions, that'll determine whether you're left on as the deputy station chief there in Mexico City. And so Joe said, what is it? And the guy said, well, we've just spent a lot of time and energy putting together a major cocaine cartel down in Medellin, Colombia. And we're going to be smuggling major amounts of cocaine up into the United States. And a portion of the funds generated from the sale of that cocaine are going to be used to help fund the war without boundaries against your enemies and ours. And I just want to make sure that, if you're left on as a deputy up in Mexico City, you're not going to do anything to interfere with that cocaine trafficking. So Joseph Burkholder Smith looks at me and he says, and Danny, I swear to God, he said, I don't know what I'd ever done in my life that would have led them to believe that I would have gone along with that. And I looked at him and I said, how about being the deputy CIA station chief in Mexico City for a start?
Right.
And he kind of looked kind of shocked, and he turns to Dick Bill and he said, hey, I thought this guy was going to cooperate with us. And Dick said, hey, I just met the guy. He said, and so he gets up, Joseph Burkholder Smith gets up, walks around the table, sticks his hand out to me to shake my hand. I reach up and shake his hand, and he leans over and looks me in the eye, and he said, I just wanted to make sure that if you're going to do a case like this, you know who you're really dealing with.
Did you have any, up to that point, and you start to hear these kind of things, which, as we all know what history, how it played out. But at that time, did you have any clue what you were getting into and the breadth and the scope and who was going to be involved and administrations in D.C. crumbling? You know what I mean? Did you have any idea?
Well, no, I just knew that I was going to find out whatever it was, and it didn't bother me, whatever it went to. I'd already come from being, the son of a guy who was the first guy in his whole family ever to go to high school, and I ended up having a full scholarship to Harvard College, the biggest scholarship that was ever given to an American. So I was coming from nowhere, so I had absolutely nothing to lose. So I just said, hey, everything is up from here. So I didn't find it astonishing to discover what was going on. I just knew that I was getting closer and closer and closer to the deep insides of what was going on. And that's the key to this thing. The key to this thing is the fascists that helped, that bonded together with Reinhard Gehlen, the head of the Waffen-SS, anti-Soviet and anti-Eastern Bloc intelligence at the end of World War II.
Right.
Kept him off the Nuremberg War Crime Tribunal. His 100 men. They ended up being put in charge by the United States, being put in charge of West German intelligence after World War II. These were the Nazis. These were the head guys that were the anti-Soviet intelligence people for the Third Reich. They ended up being our primary source of intelligence for the whole Western powers against the Soviet Union for 26 years. And his deputy was Theodore G. Shackley.
Unbelievable.
The hand-picked guy by George H.W. Bush
yes.
to be the director of covert operations for the CIA worldwide. And when the Iran-Contra case broke, when they finally began to hold the hearings on this thing, after we've been trying to tell everybody in town about what was going on, the Republicans chose to be their head investigator for the United States Senate investigation of Iran-Contra, Tom Polgar.
When and you're a student of history too as well, and as you get these names and you're putting, I've heard your presentation since then, but do you look at this list of names and just start to go back through history and go, there's just no way that each one of these cats, every single one of these guys was involved in every dark period of American history? Of recent history. How
they're just certain key people. Theodore Shackley was one of them.
Yes.
Theodore Shackley started out. He was born in Germany and came to the United States as a young 16-year-old guy before World War II, and went in and joined the United States Army. And because of his German and Polish speaking, he became a German-American translator. He was assigned to be the translator for Reinhard Gehlen, when General Reinhard Gehlen turned himself in at the end of World War II to the 101st Counterintelligence Corps, Theodore Shackley was assigned to be his translator. That's how he started. And he worked his way, he went with Reinhard Gehlen to Fort Hunt outside of Washington, D.C. for 3 weeks, where they spent the time negotiating, getting Reinhard Gehlen put in charge of West German intelligence, you know, so he could run the anti-Soviet intelligence for the Western Bloc for the rest of the 26 years. So he was then assigned by the CIA. Once the CIA was created in 1947, Theodore Shackley was in the very inaugural class of the Central Intelligence Agency, and he was assigned to go back and become the deputy to Reinhard Gehlen, where he was from 1947. He went to the anti-Soviet and the anti-communist Special Warfare Training Academy that was set up by Reinhard Gehlen, run by Major General Otto Skorzeny of the Third Reich, who was the commandant of the Special Forces of the SS. And he's the guy that ran the anti-communist Special Warfare Training Academy. They trained 1,200 men from all of the NATO countries for the next, from 1948 to 1963. You know, and they trained them there at that place, and they fanned out all across the world, and they had this horizontal brotherhood that they were in. Their bonds with each other horizontally all across the world were much tighter than they were vertically with their own individual governments, and they were fascists. All of these guys were fascists, trained by Otto Skorzeny, you know, and that's who they are. And that they're inside the FBI, they're inside the CIA. They were inside the intelligence services, the MI5 in England, in France. They're fascists, and they believe in the fascist ideology of, you know, authoritarian rule by the major corporations and the families that own the corporations and the banks.
And you can't leave out Operation Paperclip. You can't do that either.
Operation Paperclip was only the one we know about, one that everybody knows about, because they brought back the rocket scientists who were Wernher von Braun and ran the rocket program. The one you don't know about is Operation Overcast.
Yes.
Operation Overcast is they brought out all of their anti-Soviet intelligence people in the Third Reich and put them in charge all around the world. You know, and they're fascists. These people are fascists, and that's exactly what we're looking at. And it's the same people that tried to overthrow, Franklin Roosevelt in 1934. The guys, they were all clients of Brown Brothers Harriman. And they were all represented by the law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell. And the key guy representing them all was Alan Dulles.
Oh, the story, thank you. Right on cue, we wrapped it with Alan Dulles. And you know what? And what do? You get an airport named after you. That's
right.
That's the end of the story. Hey, listen, first off, I've got an extended invitation to you to come back. Let's do it maybe in about a month. We have to do a part 2. And you know what? We didn't even get into disclosure. We didn't get into ufology. We didn't get back to the Vatican, and still it was my favorite show in a very long time. Thank you so much. Now, perfect. You mentioned the Romero Institute. What's the best way for everybody to contact you?
Yeah, the people can get in touch with us at the Romero Institute, just romeroinstitute.org. And there's you can click right on there, and you can go to the classes that I've taught at UC Santa Cruz. They're all recorded. They're on there. They've got the entire there's all but the last 2 classes of the Kennedy assassination. My publisher didn't want me to put the last 2 classes up on the internet, but where I actually told the class what happened in full detail. But the rest of the classes are there, 18 of them. They got another whole course that talks about the 8 cases that changed America. They cover the Silkwood case, 3 Mile Island, the Pentagon Papers, and all those cases. And then they've got the most recent one that I just completed last week, which is the Constitution in Crisis. You know, and it's all about natural law and the United States Constitution. So people can just sit back, and light one up and put their feet up and watch the courses for free on television.
Thank you so much. And dinner's on me the next time I see you. And like I said, a glass of red wine, and we're going to have a really good conversation. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, and people can become a member of the Romero Institute online. They'll see a place where they can click there and become a monthly member, so they can we can keep them posted about what's going on.
I highly recommend it to everybody. Thank you.
And then if they're inclined, they can send us $2. and keep us in telephone.
Yeah, thank you so much, and tell Christy thank you. And
you're welcome. You're welcome, Jimmy.
You know what I'm talking about. Thank you so much,
Yep.
Daniel.
Bless you guys.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Holy crap. Wow. Thank you. Fadernauts, you guys owe me big. That's all I have to say. And that's it. We got to get out of here. We ran to the very bloody end. Thank you so much, Daniel Sheehan. I can't thank you enough. The United States needs more people like you, and that's what this show is about. Fade to Black. Thank you, Daniel Sheehan, for all that you do. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kamarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Paul, Mark D. Kovar, LJ3, Renee, Mark Dunbar, and Jonas. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, Mark D. Kovar. Fady by Dale. Webmaster is Method of Signaling. Go to faders.org. Become a Fadernaut today. Music is Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. Spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. Syndication is KGRA The Planet. Tomorrow night, we have director Paul Davids live in studio. Do follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Email is Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Everybody be safe. See ya.